Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Blanco,
Here.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Here.
Commissioner Seifert,
Here.
Chair Lopez.
Here. Okay, some additional information for the Zoom study session. This is a regular Planning Commission hearing. Comments should have been submitted to the planning staff via email by 3 p.m. this afternoon. If you wish to comment on an agenda item, please use the raise hand icon on the Zoom platform. Once you are recognized, you will be unmuted and allowed to comment on the business at hand in the order received. Maximum comment time is 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. If you're calling in and wish to be acknowledged, please raise your hand by dialing *9 and identify yourself when unmuted. We'll go to the first item, or the next item is the approval of the Planning Commission minutes of December 2nd, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to read those? If so, could we have a motion, please?
I move that we accept the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Seifert, seconded by Commissioner Hernandez. May we please have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Seifert,
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item is the public comment period. Each member of the audience may address the commission on any subject within the commission's business. Each member of the audience and each subject is limited to a discussion of 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment on something not on the agenda item? Not an agenda item. Okay, I don't see anyone. I have a real quick announcement. I just wanted to share that there was a young lady from Pioneer Valley High School that received a full ride scholarship to Yale. I think her name was Evelyn Willis. Very, very awesome. It's nice to hear some good news in the times we're in now.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. That is good news.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
All right, so a little bit about the procedure with respect to our public hearings. I will introduce the agenda item and turn it over to staff for the presentation. Once staff's presentation is completed, I will open the agenda item to the commissioners to ask any questions of staff. After all questions by the commissioner are answered, I will open the agenda item to the applicant who will be on as an attendee. I will then ask the commissioners if they have any questions of the applicant. Once the commission has asked questions of the applicant, I will then open the item. I will then open up the item to the public for those in favor, against, or neutral toward the agenda item. For the public, please wait to raise your hand until after I've called for public comment on the item, and the host will unmute you in the order received. If you're dialing in, please use *9 to raise your hand. You will have up to 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. When public comment is completed, only the applicant will be able to make any rebuttal. After the rebuttal, no further questions from the commission. I will close the public hearing and turn the agenda item back to the commission for any questions, comments, discussions, or motions. We will move to the first item of the agenda. The first item is, First item is Blosser Southeast Area 5B tentative track map at the northeast corner of Blosser Road and Battles Road. Before we start with the staff presentation, does any commissioner wish to disclose any ex parte communication?
Yes, I received emails from the planner that was hired by the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hernandez.
I did as well, Chair. I did get some emails from Lori, and I did have a conference call yesterday with her.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco.
Chair, I had some emails passed along to me, but have not had any actual communication face-to-face.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson.
And that's the same with me, Chair. I've had emails, but no communications, no telephone calls, anything like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. I also received emails, and I did have a phone conversation with Lori Tamura from Urban Planning Concepts. So with that said, may we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lopez and commissioners. My name is Dana Eady, and I'm going to be giving the staff presentation this evening for the Gloucester Southeast Area 5B tentative tract map. So the project site, which is known as Area 5B of the Gloucester Southeast Specific Plan, is located at the northeast corner of Battles Road and Gloucester Road. The site is 145 acres in size, and it's currently utilized for agricultural cultivation. Surrounding development to the site includes single-family homes to the north, south, and southwest. Menami Park is to the east, and then industrial development is to the northwest. The Santa Maria Fairgrounds and Santa Maria High School are located to the northeast of the site. The Santa Maria Valley Railroad borders the site to the east and is adjacent to Depot Street. These are some photos of the existing site as viewed from surrounding roadways. The photos at the top of the slide are from Depot Street, adjacent to the railroad looking west, and the bottom photo is from Gloucester Road looking southeast across the site. The site has been used continually for agricultural cultivation for many years. So this slide shows the existing zoning and land use designations of the property. The site includes 12.2 acres of convenience center zoning in the northwest corner of the site. And the southwest, north, and central portions of the property are zoned for residential development, with about 59 acres zoned for single-family residential development, and then around 28 acres for high-density residential. And around 23 acres of the site is zoned for a new school, which is located in this area here. And then approximately 19 acres of the site along the eastern portion of the property is zoned for a new public park. And the entire site also has a planned development overlay on it. And so any future development would require a planned development permit. And so this existing zoning was approved in August of this year by the city council. And that was as part of a general plan amendment and rezone of the site that was approved along with a specific plan for Area 5B. The applicant is requesting to subdivide the 146.5 acre property into 12 lots for future development of the site. The lot lines follow the existing zoning of the property. So lot 1 would include the future commercial development, which is here. Lot 5 is zoned for the school. Lot 6 is the open space area. And then the remaining lots are labeled here as either R1 or R3 development. And then lot 12.
Excuse me, Dana? Am I supposed to be seeing this on my screen?
Yes, you're not seeing it?
I see you. Am I on the wrong screen, or is it me? Or?
Is anyone else having any issues seeing the presentation? No.
Everybody else has it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
I have
I'm
it as
in.
well.
Sorry to bother you. I figured out what it is. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Worried me for a second. All right. So anyway, I was going to talk about lot 12. So lot 12 is at the southwest portion of the property, and that's dedicated for a future detention basin on that property. And that's about 3.5 acres. So no development is proposed as a part of this project. And as I mentioned, any future development of the site would require planned development permits, as well as additional tract maps to subdivide the lots further for development. So this is the site circulation plan, and this is from the approved specific plan for Area 5B. Western and La Brea Avenues would be extended through the site with a traffic circle in the center of the site. New traffic signals would be installed at the intersections of Western Avenue and Battles, as well as Western Avenue and Stoll Road. And the existing traffic signal at Gloucester Road and La Brea Avenue would be modified to create a 4-leg intersection. An additional signal would also be installed at the intersection of Battles Road and Thornburg Avenue. And that intersection is not shown on this map, but it is a requirement per the conditions of approval for the project. And that's as a result of the traffic study that was done for the project. So the new sections of Western and La Brea Avenue are identified as collector roadways within the specific plan. And the design of these new roads are shown in this slide, and they include 12-foot wide lanes with 5-foot bike lanes and no on-street parking. And that's consistent with the existing section of Western Avenue that's to the south of the site. A landscape parkway and planted buffers are located on each side of the road, and they're separated by a new 8-foot wide multi-purpose trail. And that trail will include separate lanes for both pedestrians and bikes. And so the overall right-of-way width for Western and La Brea for the new sections is 86 feet. And so these are sections from the tract map for Western Avenue, and they are consistent with the requirements in the specific plan that I just showed. So you have an 86-foot right-of-way overall, 12-foot wide lanes with 5-foot wide bike lanes, and then the 10-foot parkway, the 8-foot wide multi-purpose trail, and then an additional 8-foot wide landscape buffer on each side. And that's going to be the same for both Western Avenue and then also for La Brea Avenue, which is shown in this slide. So in addition to the new sections of Western and La Brea, the project conditions of approval also include improvements to 3 arterial roadways, which are Blosser Road, Battles Road, and Stoll Road that border the site. The improvements to these roadways include those that are shown on the tract map. So that includes sidewalk, curb, and gutter improvements, along with widening the road in some areas. In addition, as part of the overall required frontage improvements for this project, the Public Works conditions of approval include requirements to improve some areas of these existing roadways, which are currently experiencing structural failures. Prior to this hearing, Public Works staff surveyed the roadways and identified areas that are structurally failing and determined what improvements are necessary to bring these sections of the roadway up to city standards. So the requirements are shown in this slide for each of the 3 roads, and these requirements have been incorporated into condition number 11 of the conditions of approval. And I'm going to be presenting those changes to you in the last slides of this presentation. And so just to quickly go over them, each road requires a few sections of road to be replaced. And those areas are called out here on the slide. And then each of these roadways also require an addition of 2 inches of asphalt to the roadway center line. And that's just on the side of the road that is adjacent to this development. Storm drainage infrastructure includes a new 3.5-acre detention basin located on lot 12 that's shown here in this slide. The basin has been sized to accommodate the runoff from future development of the site, and it's been reviewed by both the city and as well as Santa Barbara County Flood Control. The existing Battles channel that is located along the southern boundary of the site is also proposed to be improved as a part of this project. And the next slides are going to include the proposed improvements for both of the detention basin as well as the Battles channel. So for the detention basin, the conditions require the developer to provide a final drainage report that demonstrates that the basin has been sized to meet both City of Santa Maria and Santa Barbara County Flood Control District requirements. Both Lot 12 and the basin are conditioned to be privately owned, with the city maintaining the landscaping of the basin as well as the stormwater runoff capacity. And so that includes desilting the basin as needed. The developer or landowner would be required to maintain the storm drainage infrastructure as well as post-construction performance and monitoring requirements. For the Battles channel improvements, the developer is required to improve the channel in accordance with the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and City of Santa Maria standards. The design would include a buried conduit with landscape surface swale with improvements. And those improvements could include a walking trail on the landscaped area. The developer, per the conditions of approval, is required to fund the improvements through an agreement with the city of Santa Maria. And there are 3 steps involved with that process. So step 1 requires a hydrological analysis and a conceptual design. And then the second step is the final design of the conduit and the swale system. And then the third and last step is construction and inspection of the buried conduit and the swale system. For operation and maintenance of the channel, the underground facilities would be operated and maintained by Santa Barbara County Flood Control. And then the surface improvements that include the drainage inlets and connector pipes would be maintained by the city of Santa Maria. So as I mentioned previously, we do have some proposed revisions to condition number 11. I'm going to go through those in the next slide. There's a lot of language on each of the slides, so it may look overwhelming, but I've underlined the changes, so I'll just walk you through those. So this is condition 11I, and it's I, J, and K, which we are proposing changes. And so this slide has it underlined, and what this is stating is that the work that was identified that needs to be completed to the sections of roadway, provided that it's completed by December 31st, 2025, this is what would be required in items A and B. If the work is not completed by that time, then this portion of the condition would not apply, and it would, the applicant or developer would then just be required to meet city standards. So Public Works added this language to clarify exactly what is needed within the next 5 years. And so this same change is made for Stoll Road in this condition. This is the same change for Blosser Road, which is 11J. And then the same change for 11, or sorry, this one's Blosser. This one's actually for Battles. Excuse me, that is mislabeled, but 11K is for Battles Road. So with all of those changes, staff recommends that the Planning Commission by resolution conditionally approve tentative tract map TR 2019-3. I would like to mention that we have Mr. Mark Mueller from Public Works available to assist with questions. We also have Mr. Scott Christian from Rec and Parks, and as well as the applicant is here as well to provide any comments they have. And we did actually receive, before I forget, we did receive a comment letter from the applicant, and I did send that out to the commission, and it's posted online with some concerns regarding some of the project conditions. And we also received a letter from the Santa Maria Valley Railroad, which outlines some improvements that they would like to see to an adjacent railroad crossing. So thank you. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Dana. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. Would the commission like to hear from the applicant? Because it seems like the items that were brought to the attention in the staff report, as well as some additional items that are part of the letter that was sent by UPC. Would the commission like to hear the presentation given by the applicant first, or would the commission like to ask questions of staff?
I would prefer to hear the applicant's presentation.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. May we please hear from the applicant?
Hello, this is Lori Tamora. I hope I'm heard well.
Loud and clear, Lori.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for hearing this project. First of all, Dana, thank you for a very thorough presentation. There's not much more I can add in regards to the project. This has been undergoing for about 4 years with the city, and it did undergo a environmental impact report, specific plan, your hearing, the city council hearing. So this action is the final implementation for getting the development of the Area 5B moving forward. We have spent time since August. Initially, this was going to be heard in August, but flood control raised issues in regards to how the basin that's proposed on Lot 12 was designed, as well as some of the issues tied to the reconstruction of the channel. So for the last 4 or 5 months, Ethel Engineering, our staff have been working with flood control to allay their concerns, address issues. We did get the thumbs up from flood control a couple of weeks ago, and are heading towards this planning commission meeting. A week ago, we received a set of conditions that were different than the conditions that we received in August, and raised a number of concerns. Staff met with us, and we worked through a number of those conditions, and want to appreciate both Scott from Recreation and Parks, as well as Mark from Public Works, and Dana for resolving a number of concerns that we had about the project. We did come across 4 items that, as Dana indicated, were concerns. The new conditions that have been added to I, J, and K in the road sections are new to us. The city has never required us to rebuild existing city streets. So we questioned this condition, how it got there, why it got there, and what means by which it was allowed even to be added to the conditions. So staff did work with us in regards to isolating the requirements so that we would not be looking at a potential rebuilding of Battles, Wasser, and Stoll. We appreciate the work that Kevin McEwen did in identifying those areas of road sections that they're concerned about, and reduce the magnitude of these improvements to something that we could understand. We still are highly opposed to the wording of the conditions. We would like to see those removed. We believe it starts precedents within the city of rebuilding city streets for every project in the future. And so we cannot agree to those conditions. So we understand that there may be some improvements that need to be done. We're willing to work with the city on those. They're definitely beyond the magnitude of what has been provided for in previous projects. For example, Eno's Ranch, or even the Betaravia Plaza project that's currently being built, did not have to rebuild sections of Betaravia Road or Wasser. This is a new trend, and we think that the city should rethink how they're going to be conditioning projects, and particularly projects in the future. So our request, as illustrated in the letter that we provided, is to delete everything that was highlighted in yellow. We will accept the items that are highlighted in gray to move this project forward. So we think that is a win-win, and something that we can work with the city on. And so that takes care of those, and we wish that that would happen tonight. The next item is in regards to the basin. We believe the basin should be a publicly owned basin. All of the basins in that region, Basin A, the 2 school basins are all owned by the city. This is, again, a new trend in the city not accepting basins in these projects. There are basins that are in the commercial zones, or in the multifamily, or in the school, or the park. Those are all maintained. But when you have a basin in a neighborhood, residential subdivision, you don't want to create a homeowners association as a private entity to maintain just a basin that adds huge amounts of costs that are wasted costs. And so we would like to propose to the city this become a public basin. We will be glad to add an endowment or some other means of funding long-term maintenance of this basin, but there's no reasonable mechanism for holding this basin in private ownership. We think it's a recipe for disaster of this particular proposal that the city is bringing forth. The two other comments that we provided in the letter are more of a statement about infrastructure that's offsite, that's being obligated to this project. When City of Santa Maria proposes new projects or flood control proposes a new project, this was not proposed by the development. It was required by the city. You know, the basin, the channel along Battles Road works fine, but now we're going to rebuild it, and we think that the city and flood control should partner with the development rather than laying the whole responsibility of this infrastructure on the development community. We did get a late letter from Railroad on the same issue. They have a 50 or 60-year-old railroad arms that need to be replaced. It is something that the railroad should have taken care of previously. There's a railroad crossing on Stoll that needs to be replaced. And the request from the railroad is that this developer do everything for them. And also, you know, replace the roadway at Stoll for the city of Santa Maria. We did talk with the railroad today. I think there's some opportunities for collaboration and working with both the city and the railroad to help disperse the funds that would be taken to do this project. Unfortunately, we don't know the magnitude of the cost, and when these conditions come upon a project and we don't know what the numbers are, that's what really raises our concern about what's being asked. So tonight, I would like to see the deletion of the highlighted sentences in my letter and direction to Public Works to take responsibility for the basin. And we will continue to work with City and Flood Control on the channel and the railroad for the railroad crossing. With those changes, we request that the Planning Commission approve this project, and we look forward to any questions that you have. Thank you very much, and thanks to staff for all of their efforts.
Thank you, Lori. I'll go ahead and come back to the commission and ask if any commissioners have any questions for staff or the applicant. Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, I would like staff to address the roads issue as Mr. Morrow brought up. I don't recall there being wholesale requirements for developments to basically rebuild roads as Mr. Morrow's outlined. Can you kind of go down, can somebody in staff kind of go down the path of how that was decided and why we're requiring that of this particular applicant?
Good evening, Chair Lopez, commissioners. Commissioner Dickerson, I'll be glad. I'm sorry, apologies. I'm Mark Mueller. I'm with the Public Works Department, and I'll be glad to answer your question regarding how we came to the requirement for the maintenance of or to bring the city roadways up to current city standard. So current city municipal code, chapter 1228, there's two relevant municipal code sections that we are referencing as support for this requirement. 1228 is part of the zoning code. 1228 describes building sites. No building permit shall be issued or any parcel of land unless a parcel meets the requirements of a building site with full public improvements defined and prescribed in this title. Specifically, we go to section 122803, frontage and improvements. A parcel of land shall have frontage and a dedicated public street and or access easement to a dedicated public street acceptable to the city. Full public improvements, including streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, alleys, street trees, street lights, street signs, and all utilities, etc. So that, as well as section 11-8, 0.04 improvements required, supports the requirement to bring the adjacent roads up to city standards. So in reviewing current city standards and the current condition of the roads, the roadways as they were constructed previously were not. So following our recent update of the city standards, we've noticed that the roadways are deteriorating at a rapidly increasing pace due to inadequate design. TIs of 7 were the previous design. That has been increased to 9. It is so with the recommended improvements shown in the condition approval of a dig out and a 2-inch overlay, we anticipate those would bring those up to current city standards, which would allow proper access and development of this property.
So was it more or less waived for Betaravia when we started putting the large project forward Y101 in Betaravia, because the road was not deteriorated enough that it required it at that time? Is that the reason why? I mean, if it had been deteriorated, it would have been required, but since it wasn't, it wasn't required. Is that the way that went?
My understanding is that Betaravia Road was widened appropriately at that time. Was prior to that. But the analysis that Public Works Department has performed on for the city streets, we noted that that change to the standard is recent. So in order to continue to meet city expectations for roadway condition, we were looking at increasing the TI, and so the traffic index that the roadway is designed for is consistent with current engineering standards and is not outrageous compared to other areas in the Central Coast. So City of San Luis, County of San Luis, County of Santa Barbara, City of Santa Barbara have similar standards for their roadways.
All right. So, but it is a change then from what we've done in the past.
Correct.
Okay. So you can also, sorry to go on with this, but so your expectation is, and staff's expectation is that in the future, various developments are going to be, the analysis of the road is going to be done on basically every development, and potentially the developer is going to have to float the bill for rebuilding our roads?
If it meets the requirements of reasonableness and if there's a nexus to require that.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead, Commissioner Blanco.
Mark, so is there, I mean, is part of this, could this be attributable to the increase in traffic from the project? I mean, is there some tie back to the amount of traffic? I'm trying to justify this for the project in my mind and make sure we understand it. So is it attributable, you think, to the amount of traffic being put forth by the project? And then how does that, is there any overlap with traffic fees that the project would already be paying, traffic impact fees? And so, you know, how does that all sort of tie together? So is it an issue about the volume generated by the traffic? And then also how does this tie in with impact fees, and would impact fees already cover some of that, or is that separate in this case?
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. So I'll answer your question in two parts. The first question was, is part of this attributable to the project? So yes, the previous design for the roadway did not account for the traffic generated by this development. So it's 140 acres of development that will be directly impacting these roads, taking access from these roads. So it will see a significant increase in traffic. So the new current standards show that, or will account for that additional increase in traffic. That's also accounting for the recent trends in traffic where, more people are ordering things on Amazon, more things are delivered by trucks. As we get larger as a city, there's more and more truck traffic, which is causing impacts to our streets as we continue to develop. And there's transit services; those streets will also be more heavily impacted. Second part of your question was the traffic mitigation fees. Those would be, yes, the project would be expected to contribute to traffic mitigation impacts. Those fees would go towards the traffic mitigation, the fees identified in the AB 1600 program. The list that is prepared by the city and approved by city council identifies 2 projects that are already part of, that are on the property frontage for this site, which is the Battles and Western intersection and the Stoll and Western intersection. Both of those which were approved by city council to be installed as traffic signals. And they did not move forward with the ICE requirement or condition that was previously recommended by planning commission. But at that, I believe those are the 2 items that they would receive direct benefit from the AB 1600 program. And so their funds would, it is likely they would be receiving a credit for that work for their traffic mitigation fee impacts.
And I was going to ask if they would be getting a credit for any of that work. I would think so. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. Commissioner Seifert, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So we've never made any other developer do this work. Is that correct, Mark?
To my knowledge.
And we decided on these conditions, earlier in the year? Who changed them?
That'd be correct. The Public Works Department changed our requirements for the scope of the frontage improvements. So previous projects, by the letter of the code, we did not apply the streets requirement to other projects.
And who designed the streets originally?
That is beyond me. The last standard was updated in 1970.
They would have been approved by the city though, right?
Correct.
So they met the existing codes?
I believe so at the time.
And they were designed for the existing traffic, so they were put in appropriately. Does the city have a maintenance program?
They do.
So it sounds like we're doing an overlay and a chip seal, that type of stuff. It sounds like maintenance to me. Why aren't we maintaining these streets? Why are we saying that the developer has to do this work and add this money at the last minute to their project when we have streets, we have maintenance, we have a program in place that does this work?
So Commissioner Seifert, the difference between the maintenance program work and the anticipated work for this program is, so these streets have received cape seals, microsurfacing, etc., and the roadway is still failing. This is likely in part due to the design life of the roadways that are funding on this project. So the city is performing its requirements to maintain these roadways. The condition on the project is to bring them up to current city standards.
So let's say we have a road that's failing somewhere else. Who pays for that?
So it would depend on where and when
where there's no development going in. Who would pay for that?
It'd be the city.
So you guys, your department decided. Heather is the assistant district attorney there? The city attorney?
City attorney, yeah, she has her hand up. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I just got a question, Heather. It sounds like the department itself made these regulations, they increased them to this point earlier in their department. And now they're saying that this is a new condition that they're going to be imposing on all developments. I checked with a council member that appointed me and he hadn't heard anything about it. And he didn't know if that's something that he would support or not without hearing more about it. What is our policy on creating new conditions that haven't been there before, that are this expensive and something that we just haven't done before? How does that work?
Good evening. I'm Heather Whittam, Assistant City Attorney with the city. I think there's a distinction in that the street standards have been increased. That's citywide, There's new standards that must be met in order to meet the city's new street standards. So everybody is now, and the city is requiring that those requirements for different streets, arterials, commuter streets, that kind of thing. So that would have required an ordinance, I believe, which would have gone to the council and been approved, and those are now in place. Or it could be an internal policy setting forth those street standards. I guess I'm not sure on that. But those are now the rules that the city is applying. Now, obviously, we can't go back to every owner of property in the city that fronts a street and say, oh, we have this new standard, you have to come up to it. It doesn't work that way. The way it works, though, is when a developer comes before the city with a project, the city's under their police power and authority in the code and in the Subdivision Act has the authority to look at the project and say, oh, how is this project going to impact the existing community, the property here? And if you look, this is a very, very large project. As was stated, it's 147 acres. It's going to allow for up to 1,105 residential units, 12.2 acres of commercial development, 23 acres for a new school, and 20 acres for a new park with soccer fields and recreational amenities. So this is a big project, and there's going to be impacts from it. And there's going to be a lot more traffic generated by the residents, by the employees in the commercial center, by the people going to the commercial center, to the school. And that is going to impact our roads that, yes, are already in need of some maintenance. The city has been maintaining them. I believe some work was just recently done out there that I saw. But it's perfectly acceptable to impose on a developer that they need to do different things to address drainage, to address roads. Frequently, roads need to be widened. Maybe an acceleration lane needs to be put in. Maybe even signaling needs to be put in, because this development will impact these existing roads. And so this development, it's perfectly reasonable for them to pay the cost of making sure that these roads will be able to accommodate the additional traffic generated. I don't know if I can answer any other questions. If I didn't answer what you were asking, I'd be happy to respond.
I'm pretty sure that was sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Commissioner Seifert.
I have a question for Heather.
Okay. Commissioner Hernandez and then Commissioner Dickerson. Go ahead, Commissioner Hernandez.
Yes. So in order to get to this new standard, the city council would have had to approve that, because I also asked my city council person who appointed me, and they said they did not remember doing that.
I would defer to Mr. Mueller if that city standard is codified or if that's a policy. I don't have that information.
I know our city standards are approved by the Public Works Director. I don't know if the standards are continually taken to city council and approved under an ordinance or resolution.
Thank you, Engineer Mueller. Commissioner Dickerson.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on Commissioner Hernandez's and Commissioner Seifert's. I'm concerned about this new standard having gone through and the impact that it would have on developers, be it small or large. Frankly, it doesn't sound like it was, well, no council member remembers it, and I certainly don't remember it coming before our commission. So it seems that staff probably made a fairly large change internally, and I'm not sure if they ran it by any commission or council members and I'm not sure that it's required of them, but it probably would have just been a good idea. I'm very concerned that as this thing flows out beyond this large development to other developments. So yeah, it is a concern to me. and I think if I'm hearing correctly from the others, it's a concern from them as well. So I would certainly want to know how it was codified, whether it was internally by staff or if it was run by one of the either the commission or the council before I move forward with imposing that fee on this developer.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. My feeling, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, this is Dana Eady, and I just wanted to jump in. And I did want to mention, in speaking with Public Works, these additional areas of the roadway which are failing and are tied to this project are being considered as frontage improvements, the overall frontage improvements for the project. And I know that frontage improvements are typically required. I think the issue that I'm hearing is it might be going beyond what is typical for frontage improvements, but the city standards do apply to all the frontage, and that includes existing roadways. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you, Dana. Commissioner Hernandez?
Yeah, while I understand that we may have new city standards and staff would have done that, I believe that we still needed to give notice to any new applicants of the new standard. And I think that's where the disconnect and the miscommunication is occurring. And so I think that's a huge problem because we want to make sure that applicants understand what could be imposed on them when they come and apply. And it's not a shock when they get a new condition. They feel like it's never been applied before to other people. Why is it being applied now? And so I would like to vet that issue and how that came to be.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Hernandez, but plus I'm not even sure internally this making the shift, it sure seems like it was a different way of going about of imposing the maintenance of roads from the city to all of a sudden developers. And it's not just an issue of this particular project or anything. It's that there's already fees that are brought in. There's already taxation. There's all these various elements that are meant to keep the roads up and running. And it just seems like this should be, as Commissioner Seifert put it, under normal circumstances, the city would be maintaining those roads. And this particular developer or any other developer in the same situation gets put into kind of a bad spot if the city has not maintained its own roads and a developer is unlucky enough to decide to actually want to develop their property, then all of a sudden they have to float the bill for the fact that we did not do our jobs of maintaining the roads. And it almost leads to a situation of, keeping an eye on various properties and just sitting back and waiting for that property to develop. And all of a sudden we don't have to maintain it. It just doesn't pass the smell test for me. And I would sure rather have that particular thing brought back to some oversight, be it us or be it city council, somebody discussed and thumbs up or thumbs down on it. But it'd be nice if it was not internalized because I think it makes a big shift, and it's a big conceptual shift as well as financial shift.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Commissioner Seifert?
I have to agree with the other two commissioners. Having this thing come up on Friday and say that, we've known about this, the city made this change earlier in the year. It just doesn't seem fair to the developer, as Maribel so well put, Commissioner Hernandez. She looks at these things from a lawyer's point of view, and they've never been told they were going to have this condition. They weren't prepared for this condition. They didn't have money put aside for this condition. And as Commissioner Dickerson says, my concern is I feel that the city council should be involved in this decision. If the city council has always told me we're business friendly. We want to promote businesses. We want to promote development. We want more housing. We want more affordable housing. We want to make it easier for people to do things. This is completely the opposite of that. This is going to take a huge amount of money. I think it was 600 something thousand or over that Mr. Morrow had estimated for this particular section. But that's an estimate. When you start tearing up these roads and you see what's in there, we don't know if that's a correct estimate or not. And with the way that the prices have been going on materials, I can tell you that the lumber market has gone crazy this last year. I would imagine that oil, asphalt, bitumen, everything that we're talking about here is going wild in pricing. These people they've been working on this project, I think she said about 4 years. And now she's right about at the finish post. And we're going to put up almost another $1 million in the way of them completing this project. So I'm having a real issue with this one. And that's why I went to my council member to find out, had he known about this? Is this something that they agreed to? And as the other two commissioners, no one can remember ever discussing this. So I would really like to see where this came from. And I would like to make sure that this is the direction that council wants to go, because it is going to affect our development. It's going to affect our developers. It's going to affect projects. And frankly, if this is imposed on this project, who knows? Maybe it'll get built, maybe it won't. It might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So I'm glad we're looking at this from this direction, because it surprised me when I read the letters and I saw the timing of this. It is really, you're almost to the finish line, and then somebody says, yeah, but you're going to have to put a 100-pound pack on and run the rest of the way before you make it on the finish line. It doesn't seem fair to me. So that's the way I'm looking at it right now. I have to agree with the other two commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Dickerson, please go ahead.
If there are other commissioners who have more input on this particular element of things, then I'd like to defer to them to go ahead and do that. But if there aren't, I also want to address the railroad, the railroad maintenance as well. And it's more of a question. I know that various entities, sometimes they skirt the realm of a private concern or a private business versus a pseudo-private business like utilities and that sort of thing. Where does the railroad fall into that? Are they a private concern, or are they some sort of one of this kind of gray area where they're a little in between? Can someone address that for me?
Commissioner Dickerson, I see, I think our Public Works Director, Mr. McCune, on. He has his hand up. Mr. McCune, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners, Chair and Commissioners. Before you moved off the street item, I appreciate the chance to provide some input to the Commission.
Sure.
There's been a lot of questions raised about this item, and I wanted to give you a perspective from the city. City standards are available on the website. That is the location where all developers go to look at our current standards. They are updated on a regular basis, both large and small updates, whether they're related to utility standards or street standards or parks and rec standards. So these are routine items that do not go to the city council. That is delegated responsibilities. So the applicant does know where to find the current city standards. These were updated not a week ago. These were updated in April of this year. I'm sorry. So plenty of time for them to have reviewed and become familiar with the current city standards. With respect to the idea that the city should just do this work, I appreciate that, and that is one way to look at it. Unfortunately, the city cannot maintain the infrastructure it already has. We have a $1 billion street system in terms of total value. We have about $10 million a year to maintain that $1 billion asset. And we're underfunding by about $3 million a year. So what does that mean? That means we have to prioritize where the work is done. That means our service and pavement condition is degrading and falling. So we are on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being a brand new road. On average, our street systems we're about a 68, which is dropping by 1 point every year. So we are in the at-risk category, and within 7 to 8 years, we will be at the poor rating. So clearly what we've been doing in the past is not working. And these frontages that we're talking about are directly adjacent to the project. We're not asking them to do work that doesn't have a nexus to the project. And what we're seeing out there is the roads, without adding one more trip from this development, are already showing indications of the traffic loading is exceeding the capacity of the road. So take Battles, for instance. That road is about 15 years old. We've done several maintenance treatments on it, one in the last 5 years. So it's certainly been maintained, yet it's showing pavement distress and base failures already in the wheel path. So that is a clear indication that the loading, the traffic that is just citywide that road is already at capacity. So now you go in and add the size of this project directly adjacent to that, the road will fail very, very quickly. So just like when ADA standards are upgraded and a curb ramp has to be torn out because the new standard applies, that's what we're talking about here. Is the city has taken a look at its road network and updated to reflect that the traffic loading has changed over the last 30 years. We have more truck traffic than we did back then. And that's what this TI item that Mark Engineer Mueller was talking about. So we have upgraded our standards for the long term of the city. We need a road network that will be here for the next 50 years. And the city cannot afford to subsidize development in this way. So I appreciate your support on this item. I understand that it is a change from the past, but clearly a change is needed. And I'd be happy to address any other items on that item, on this issue, if you'd like.
Thank you, Engineer McCune. Commissioner Dickerson.
Mr. McCune, I appreciate your stance on the topic. I wonder though if you're telling us that our road system is perpetually underfunded, which means it's perpetually degrading and failing, then I wonder if it isn't a bigger picture item than just internally as kind of a fait accompli, having staff choose a segment of the population and saying you're floating the bill for this. It seems to me a bigger picture that perhaps instead of going that direction, you might have taken it to the public, you might take it to the city council, whoever it is that we go with, but a decision needs to be made as a community how we're going to pay for our road systems rather than just staff pointing a finger at a group and saying, congratulations, you're the big loser this evening. It really just, it smacks of that. And I appreciate, the situation you're in of trying to maintain the roads. I get that. But once again, I think that we need to, as a community as a whole, make the decision on how we maintain our roads. And it just, I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me, and apparently it didn't sit well with others as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Commissioner Blanco, please go ahead.
Yeah, a question for Mr. McCune. Are we looking at objectively identifying the impacts for these projects and being able to assess their fair portion of the mitigation? I mean, I understand that you guys probably looked at the areas that were failing, looked at the PCI and some of those items, but I think it would make some sense to be able to, that's kind of what I was asking Mr. Mueller was, can we attribute it directly to the traffic impacts that the project is having, directly to their frontage? Moving forward, I guess, are we going to be able to know, are they going to be, as the applicant, going to be able to know on an analytic basis what to expect early on for their cost and understanding what their real impacts are? I know, traffic impact study looks at circulation, but maybe it fails to look at, pavement condition situations and impacts to those items of work. And so do you expect it to be a more analytic and objective approach in the future, rather than maybe a little bit more subjective situation?
Yes, what I'd like to do, and what I encourage the applicant this time to do, was to work with the city to do some testing to figure out what really is needed on these frontages. In this case, the applicant chose not to do that, and that's okay. But that would be my preference, is to work with them during the development of the project to provide some certainty moving forward. And Mr. Mueller also mentioned a key point in that the conditions need to be appropriately sized, right? So if a developer is fronting a road that, say it's we can't have a situation where the development is infeasible due to the conditions of approval. I guess that would be a better way to say it. Whatever those conditions are. So there's also always a reasonableness test that is applied, and we recognize that. And so those are my 2 points. We would like to work with the developers to better identify these ahead of time. And we'll get better at that, frankly. And I recognize that we can do better at that. The city, I'm disappointed that the applicant has chosen the path of still opposing this condition. We started with a condition that just said, well, upgrade to meet city standards. And they said, well, we would like to understand that better. Could you help us understand that better? So we work with them on that to come up with a ceiling so that they know what their costs are, and they know it would go no higher than a certain amount. Frankly, that's a big concession for the city. That means if we missed an area, or there's a really poor area that the underlying soils are particularly bad, the fix our cost. The ceiling is already fixed. So I'm disappointed that the developer couldn't meet me halfway on that, but it's a process. I understand.
Thank you, Engineer McCune. We got Commissioner Seifert and then Commissioner Hernandez.
Engineer McCune, why did you wait till Friday to give these conditions?
Yeah, conditions are not final until they're final. It's we've been. I needed to make sure that there was clarity to the conditions. So, and they didn't provide the clarity that we needed. So the conditions that always said improve the frontage along all three sides. What we didn't say, and we didn't communicate as clearly as I wanted to, was that this was something that was going to be needed. So I decided to make that clear rather than doing it during, say, the development plan that comes forward, because that would have, I didn't feel like that would have been fair. So we wanted we wanted to make it clear now. So I understand the desire to have final conditions earlier in the process, but frankly, sometimes, you're working up till the very end.
But you have known about these since April?
City standards were updated in April.
So let's go with a scenario that we imply that we say, okay, well, we're going to go with Engineer McCune and we're going to impose this on them. And they say we can't afford the project. we're not going to build it. So we have the same street that we have right now. And we have the same problem that we have right now. So is this really a fix? Is this really the correct way to go? I have to agree with Commissioner Dickerson. I don't believe that this is well thought out. I don't believe that this is a good fix for us as a city. I think if we try to impose more of these fees on the developers as they come in and then they can't build their projects, everybody loses. So I'm just having a hard time with the thought behind this, the upgrade, the timing of it, and then imposing these really onerous conditions. So I think you're getting a feeling that, you know, from the people that are looking at what's going on here, it would have been much better to have let them know a long time ago, hey, we've got some new rules in effect and we're going to make you abide by these, rather than wait till 2 days before their meeting. So I'm just having an issue with it. And I understand that we have problems with the streets. And I know that we have to come up with a way to fund the streets, but I'm not sure this is appropriate. I don't think this one's being handled quite right. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Hernandez?
Yes, when was the application submitted initially to the planning department?
Commissioner Hernandez, it was submitted in 2019, last year.
What month?
I'll need to look that up and get back to you in a few moments.
Okay.
On the exact month.
Okay. And Mr. McCune, how long have you been working with the applicant on this project?
Yeah, Planner Edie would be better about that. I don't have those details. I mean, however long the process they applied to planning, so they don't work separately with us than they do for planning.
Thank you, Engineer McKim. Real quick, I do see we have Mr. Blau raising his hand. We're not at the public comment period yet, Mr. Blau. As soon as we get there, we'll go ahead and take your question. I do want to add that we've been about an hour into this meeting and we're still on one of the first items of the 7 that are requested that the applicant has requested we look at. Rather than spend an hour on each item, does the commission have a sense of how they view the other items, the other 6 items with respect to the letter that was written by Ms. Tamura? I just so that at least we have some direction or have some. I want to get through this meeting without a lot of time being spent. If all our time's going to be spent on this one item, which is a very big item, I absolutely understand that. But if we're going to move forward, I'd like to get a sense of where everyone's at. Commissioner Seifert.
Thank you, Chair. I've been advocating for the city to put these basins into the tax base, collect taxes from them, and own the basins. I've been trying to get this before the Northern project. Something's happened to the city. They used to do this. They actually make money on this. This is a profit item where if they charge the right amount, then the tax that comes right off of the taxes. There's no homeowners association, and it's done correctly. We've talked about this a number of times. The city has a fear about the SWIP and the regional water quality control monitoring, but we've been after an answer for these basins for years now, or at least a year since they've been refusing to do what they've normally done in the past. I'm with Ms. Tamura as how these basins need to be handled. I do agree with that. What else we got? We got the flood control ditch. I think at the very least it needs to be a joint project. We're improving. We're actually modifying and improving. What else do you got there that you wanted to go over?
We had the detention basin that you talked about, the ownership of the detention basin. Hold on one second. I'm looking at the letter. That was the three of those 7 are IJK, which is the
Yes.
condition we were talking about.
So that's the letter that I have. That's what I just addressed. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So, let me see, I think the last one had to do with the railroad letter. I don't know.
Oh, I would be happy to go on that too. As long as I've been on this commission for 5 years, every letter that I've gotten, that I've received from the railroad has been a negative letter towards the development and towards growth in this valley. I can almost imagine what the letter's going to look like before I open it. And now they're coming to us, it's not.
Oh, Commissioner Schieffer, you're cut out. We'll come back to Commissioner Schieffer. Any other commissioner would like to kind of give a direction of what they're thinking about on these conditions? Commissioner Dickerson.
I agree with Commissioner Seifert is back if he wants to finish off about the railroad.
I'll try to get it in quickly. So I don't hold their letters in very high esteem at this point. We need a crossing at Carmen. We need a crossing at A Street. We need to know that they're actually here to work with us and to work with this city. Everything that they've implied in the past has been they don't want any growth. They don't want to agree to anything. They don't want to cooperate in anything. So this letter and this ask to me is almost like the boy that cried wolf. So I don't agree with it only on the basis is that they've never agreed with anything that's been brought before them. So I don't agree with their ask on this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Dickerson, please go ahead.
I agree with Commissioner Seifert on the basins and the discussion there. I think that should be something that the city takes on or is in one of the other elements to be a joint project in some way. So I agree with that. Regarding the roads, I guess my sense on the thing is if we were trying to craft the resolution, I guess where I would come down on it is that I would leave the option open that they are going to have to pay for the roads, but under this caveat that an affirmative decision is made by a body of some kind. In other words, the discussion is had. Either I don't know if we have the authority or if it gets booted to the city council. I don't know, but a discussion needs to be had on how we're going to move forward with paying for roads. And I just don't. It's just not right to me that staff can impose that very large ask on a community on a particular group without going down the road of having some sort of open debates about how we're going to do that in the big picture. So all I would say is that I would put something in there that basically says that they may have to pay depending on what the final decision is. Encompass it in now with the decision that could come down the road. But if the decision down the road is that the developers are not the ones that by themselves are going to have to float the bill for this, then they won't have to pay for it. But I think the discussion needs to be had, and we can't just sign off on it, because the moment we sign off on it, that's it. It's done, and it will be the law of the land and how that thing travels, for other developments down the road. In regards to the railroad, I understand Commissioner Seifert's frustration. Like him, every letter is a negative letter, and then there's just something a little irksome, because occasionally we want to work with the railroad to, for instance, bring roads through over tracks, and they just dig their heels in and say, no, we couldn't possibly. So really, there just is a lot of negativity there. But I go back to this concept, the question I had earlier, and that is, if they are a private entity, not a public, not a pseudo public entity, which I would like an answer on that, then I don't see why we would ask a developer to pay for their maintenance. If they are a pseudo-public entity, that there might be an argument for it. If there is some sort of a past, if we've had some sort of past actions that flow in that manner. But I'd like to know that first before I decided on that.
Anything on the flood channel?
On the flood channel, I agree with, once again, I agree with Commissioner Seifert on that. So there we go.
Okay. Commissioner Blanco, please go ahead.
I do have a question. I think we've touched on a lot of the topics, especially the road issue. However, on the channel, I do have a question. Maybe Mr. McCune can answer. What is driving that? Is there a master plan for that channel to have been underground at some point, and so we're just working towards, or this developer is somehow responsible for that portion of work? Or what is the background with this? Because just to the west of this project, the development just to the west, that section of the channel obviously is not underground, and I don't see that there's any concerns with flooding there. And so why this section? Why is this section being required to be undergrounded? Again, is it a master plan by flood control? Is it something that the developer should have known about? What is a little bit of the background there, Mr. McKeon?
Sure. Through the chair, thank you for the question. So the channel does perform as a flood control channel right now. I don't think there is capacity or performance issues with what's there. I think the issue for the city was the way it looks and the need to upgrade the frontage when a development comes in. So there are certain expectations that we have of frontages along new developments. And the city would like this, and I'm kind of speaking more for planning now than I am in engineering, but the city looked for opportunities to have something that was more aesthetically pleasing than was there. So we have been, we reached out to flood control to see if they would be interested in and then the second part of that is it's a regional flood control facility that flood control does not maintain currently. So, which is very odd. So there's a upstream of this facility, the regional flood control agency maintains that part of it. Downstream of this facility, which is the basin further on down, the flood control agency maintains that. But there's this stretch in the middle that for whatever reason is city maintained. And as you noted, west of Blosser, probably certainly not in a way that I think meets our standards. So I assume lack of funding is a lot of the reason for that. So when this project came along, the city started a discussion with the applicant to see what could be done. And what was arrived at was undergrounding, doing away with the dirt channel, putting this into a pipe, and creating a opportunity for some recreation and adjacent green space, and having the flood and what would it take for flood control to accept that facility and maintain it on the road. So that's kind of the long-winded story of how that all worked. This has been something that, we've been probably working on this for over a year, I would imagine. And along with the applicant, and I believe, again, it's in one of those categories of it's a frontage improvement. The code requires the applicant to improve their frontage, and that's why that's why it's a part of the conditions of approval. And one other note on this is the specific plan specifically says that this will be upgraded in this way to flood control standards and funded by the developer. So this issue was specifically discussed at the city council meeting. They were specifically asked, hey, we don't eliminate that language so that it doesn't say that is funded by the developer. City council decided that's the way they wanted to go and gave policy direction on this issue. So, and again, you should probably ask the city attorney to confirm, but that's my understanding of the discussion at the city council level. I believe policy direction has already been given on this item.
Thank you.
Yes, and so I did want to also just follow up on that. Mr. McCune, or Engineer McCune, is correct that undergrounding that channel is part of the approved specific plan. And so in speaking with flood control, it's this dual use approach where you have the pipe that's buried and then you have the surface swale that could include landscaping, and Rec and Parks would like a trail as well in that area. Also, I did a little research in that the application for the tract map was submitted July 1st, 2019. However, the specific plan application, general plan amendment, rezone, that all of that was approved in August of this year, that was submitted back in 2016. So the tract map came in a bit later last year.
Thank you, Dana.
Chair Lopez, if I may add on to that.
Yeah, Engineer Mueller, please go ahead.
So Commissioner Blanco, just wanted to tack on to Engineer McCune and Planner Edie's background, because you had asked about the channel west of Blosser and why that was not undergrounded, and is it part of a regional master plan. The channel is part of city right of way, and at the time of the developments north and south of that channel, it was decided, I believe at the recommendation of community development staff at that time, that it be maintained as a earthen swale and owned and maintained by the city. It would be landscaped and improved by the developer, but long-term maintenance would be performed by the city. So it is that channel is owned and maintained by the city at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanc. Oh, actually, Commissioner Blanc, you were on the channel portion, still wanted to hear on the basin and the railroad, as well as, what was the last one?
And Chair Lopez?
Yes.
And Commissioners, I did also want to answer, I think it was Commissioner Dickerson's question about the railroad. The railroad is a private entity, entity.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Commissioner Blanco, so you can you give some direction on the channel? But truly, if it's part of the specific plan, then I don't really see where we could shift any or change that condition.
I just wanted to, sorry, Chair, I just wanted to understand the background. I don't think that we understood it well enough. And I think Mr. McCune and Mr. Mueller provided some. So now, at least for me, I understand where that's coming from.
Okay. Any thoughts on the ownership of the basin, whether it goes to the city or?
Well, I do concur with the other commissioners, and I think that basin, it makes a lot of sense for the city to maintain that, to take some ownership of that. I think there's a mechanism to implement the maintenance that's required that way. I don't see it being a functional. I don't see a functional or easy way to do it otherwise. It's certainly not an easy thing, but I think the most practical thing, I think, is what we've done in the past, I believe, and that's for the city to take more responsibility of that. However, obviously have fees assessed to the property owners and the residents directly using it to pay for that maintenance. So I'm in agreement with the rest of the commissioners there. As far as the railroad crossing, that crossing is a facility that's owned by a private entity. We just got confirmed. And if it's been in disrepair for a very long time, it shouldn't have taken that long for that to be addressed. And it shouldn't be on the backs of this development to address that. It's not like it's a new crossing to this development. And so I just don't see how we can attribute that responsibility to the developer here. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blanco. And then just briefly, just the roads, 11 IJK. What was your thought on that?
Well, when I first saw the condition and I spoke with Ms. Tamura yesterday, I was a little concerned. I was very concerned actually about how open-ended that was, because trying to bring something to city standard, you know, it can be very, very onerous. If you're talking about a complete facility, it's a blank check for the developer. There's just no way to do your due diligence on something that wide open. And so I'm actually pleased that the city has been willing to look at that a little closer. Certainly, it's still a big ticket item. I think, you know, I think it's nothing to just brush off. I do agree with Commissioner Dickerson. This is a big problem that we are not the only ones that are facing. It's just, you know, maintaining the infrastructure that we have. It's just a losing battle. It's not going to be won by this project. It's not going to be won anytime soon. I think it's a big picture question that is going to need a lot of attention by a lot of people. And so that, you know, that's probably a discussion for another day. But I think at least now with what we're looking at there's something salient. There's something that can be costed out. There's something that's a little bit more reasonable than just saying, bring it to city standard and we'll figure it out later, because, you know, this is the line of work I do. And I could see that turning into a gigantic project that would certainly break this project if they had to completely repair those roads. But however, I see the traffic impacts are going to be there. Undoubtedly, this project is big enough to have a very large impact on these roads. And so I think it's fair to attribute some cost to it. Certainly not a full reconstruction, but I think in reading the condition as proposed by the city, I think it's certainly a more reasonable approach.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blanco. And so you'd be in agreement with the item A that's highlighted, or I'm sorry, that's shaded in gray, or I know you said you agreed with Commissioner Dickerson on the roads. I think he was more of a trying to get some further direction. Actually, he has his hand up. I don't know, Commissioner Dickerson, can you?
I guess what I was just going to say is I'm in agreement with the project has some responsibility for the frontage, and the proposed language by the city now is a lot more reasonable than it was when I first saw it. So I'm in agreement with the revised condition as proposed by staff, it's just a bigger battle for another day. And I think I would like to see this be better defined early on for applicants, and objectively defined and analytically defined so that they know exactly what they are responsible for, and there's some justification for it other than bringing it up to city standard. But I think I heard from Mr. McCune that is the direction that the city wants to go, is make it directly attributable to the development and have a very well-defined methodology for getting to that point.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. Commissioner Dickerson, please go ahead.
Chair Lopez, if I could ask, if I recall correctly, to what Mr. McCune said, that at one point there was a flat amount that was offered by the city, and that the applicant did not agree with that. Can Mr. McCune weigh in on what that amount was?
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner, for the question. So and I may not have been as clear as I should have been. So what you see in your packet is the condition that we presented to the applicants when our final conditions went forward.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't a flat dollar amount.
No, there was no dollar amount in there. What we then heard from the applicants saying, hey, this is, as Commissioner Blanco said, this is we don't know what the cost of this is. So the city then said, oh, that is a reasonable point. How about we recraft this thing so that you have a ceiling? Your cost could go down, right? So when you do a design and you look at the roads and you come up with a design that based on testing, your cost could be less than this, but they will never be any more than this. So that's what I attempted to do, is to create certainty for the applicants so that they can they know what they're getting into.
Thank you very much.
So we've put together our cost estimate. We think this is in the $500,000 range. They came up with something a little more than that. I think that's a little high. Frankly, even ours are with prevailing wage. So I think they're a little high, but anyway, that's what that was referring to.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. I see a hand up. That would be Mr. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Mr. Blau. Yes, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Blau, are you there?
I didn't know you had muted me. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Quite frankly, I'm going to need more than 3 minutes. I hope you give it to me. I don't remember the last time I witnessed a planning commission hearing where you got so much misinformation. So I'm going to try and be real quick to tell you what I think is the misinformation, and you can go from there. First off, I want to talk about the road system and this idea of the nexus and street frontage. No way am I agreeable that street frontage goes to the middle of the street or the entire street. If that's the case, I think the council needs to weigh in and say, yeah, street frontage means that we can ask you to replace half a street. Also, to say that this has been in existence since April, I think is also disingenuous. I think what happened was Public Works in April decided to change the street standard, going from what's typically a 4-inch over, or 3 or 4 inch of asphalt over 4 or 5 inches of base, to 7 inches of asphalt over something like 14 inches of base. And I will also tell you that I do not believe that's on the website. I tried to find it today. I think it's in Public Works' office, but not on the website. And it's inappropriate. I could be wrong. I just couldn't find it. But that needs to be changed. And I do think the council needs to codify it. I will give Kevin credit. He has told everybody that, listen, if you go out and test for R value, you can have something less than that street profile, but that he's hoping that you could have that structure and not do a R value test. Well, that's crazy. I think Public Works should require an R value test on every street they do. First off, it tells you exactly how to build a street if you go to Caltrans standards. And the R value test is a cheap test, it's $400. So why would you want to do that differently? So I don't believe the council has, and I also don't believe that there's been any project in town where you've required to rebuild a street that was built 15 years ago. And as I told Kevin McCoon when we talked earlier, so the street was built 50 years ago, somebody paid for it. For the past 15 years, you've had property taxes, sales taxes, and road taxes that were collected to do maintenance. Now you're going to say like, okay, well, we're not going to use any of that because there's not enough of it. So we're going to impose it on the development and try and pretend that there's some nexus between this street and the development. Well, I think that's not correct. I'm going quickly here, so hopefully you're not offended by that. Next thing
We are at 3 minutes. We'll go 1 more minute, Mr. Blau.
I'm going to go on. The other thing I want to talk about is the retarding basin or retention basins. I'm adamant that you please make that take ownership of it, make it a separate parcel, deed to the city. And the reason you want to do that is that you are the ones that maintaining control of it. Parks Department they do an annexation to the maintenance district, And with that, the developer, which is now the owner of the properties, agrees to a condition where in perpetuity, you can assess their property tax account for that maintenance. There is no way the city does not get paid for it. And if you do it in a homeowners association, the problem there is if you have foreclosures, bankruptcies, other failures, sometimes those are not paid. I know that Joe Centeno came to me for a project in the county that was devastated by the foreclosures. The homeowners association was getting less than a third what they're supposed to fund. We turned it into an assessment maintenance district. Now they get 100% of their assessments. You can't avoid it, not the lender, not anybody. The only other thing that I had here is I want you to understand that I'm really in favor of a program that will fix our road system and tax it. When Rick Caden called me when we were doing the property tax increase, I donated money to it. I supported it, and I think it was a great idea to with 8%. I agree the road system is underfunded, but you don't do it by creating this artificial rule to assess this property owner, which it shouldn't be. The only other comment I'm going to make tonight, by the way, is I'm a little surprised that your council is not admonishing a little bit for entering into deliberations for the past hour without taking public testimony. Normally, you wouldn't do your deliberations and make decisions or cure yourselves until you've heard from the public, because hopefully my comments or people behind me may influence your decision, because we're going to provide you with additional information. One last thing, just for Commissioner Blanco. On the idea of the AB 1600 fees, I thought the same thing and went back and read this thing this afternoon. Unfortunately, AB 1600 prohibits you from doing repairs and maintenance to the public infrastructure. Yes, you could put in signal lights. Yes, you could widen roads, but to actually repair a road is actually prohibited. So, last thing, railroad crossing thing. I've been involved in having to pay for railroad crossings when we're doing developments. And we do pay for them because we impact their railroad crossing. But once we buy it for them, it's theirs. It's theirs to own, operate, and maintain, not for us to come back and make repairs 50 years later. Those are my comments. Thanks for giving me the extra time, Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Blau. Any other person wishing to make a public comment about this project? Mr. Moto, 3 minutes.
Oh, this is Rob Himoto from San Ramon Valley Railroad. So the railroad is a private enterprise, but it's for the public good. So we're more like a utility. We're governed by the CPUC. As far as being negative over projects, it's just most of these projects have a negative effect on our railroad. So sorry to always bring these negative things up. This particular letter today was kind of a response. I contacted Public Works. It said something about reading through this. It had something about the crossing. And he said, well, make your comments about upgrading the crossing. The crossing was put in 1973 and works great for 1973 standards, except it's not designed for the heavier traffic, and this is going to definitely bring heavier traffic. Months ago, there was an agreement to put a pedestrian overpass over the railroad tracks, and that to alleviate problems with the railroad, and that was taken out by the city council. So I think minimum the crossing needs to be addressed to more modern standards. We've been doing some studies as far as impact on the railroad in costs, and I'll probably bring that up to the planning staff later. We're still compiling it, but it's pretty profound, especially the past year. We've had a new management change where we're trying to maintain the railroad better, get rid of the trash and the trespassers, but it's very costly. And we actually have an increase of trespassers, and that has a cost to it because every time it slows or stops the railroad, it impacts our operations. The railroad is really a part of the solution to alleviate the road congestion. We take trucks off the road, and we're trying to do our part to improve Santa Maria in that respect. Another management change is we're trying to figure out ways where we can contribute to these new developments, a lot of residential, and we're kind of coming up with a master plan in the future to do excursions and commuter rail to further utilize our line rather than just freight, because a lot of our line is going away from freight where there's no possibility to have freight customers, especially along this corridor. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
Chair Lopez, you're muted.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I was trying to turn off the timer. Okay, I'll go ahead and take it back to the applicant for any rebuttal.
Thank you. This is Lori Tamora. Great discussion here tonight. I wholeheartedly agree with most of it. We do, need to understand that Area 5B was part of the 1993 sphere of influence and annexation. There's been development planned on this property for 25 years. The road systems within the city of Santa Maria were anticipating this development. This is not anything new. And the idea that the road system is failing is not part of the fact that the city standards at that time did not anticipate this kind of growth. So to say that new projects are going to have to come through and tear up city streets to the new super duper standard that now has been adopted as of April, which basically doubles all of the construction specs, is something that I think needs to have a bigger policy discussion than just, starting with our project as the first one to take this condition on. Kevin is right. He offered us to do an R value on Friday. That was the first time. First time we saw these conditions were last week. We appreciate the negotiations that went on. We understand the bind he is in, but we think that this should be discussed in a much bigger forum for the whole city. I can only imagine 5 years from now when this policy, if this policy moves forward, where some of these streets are going to look like patchwork quilts with repairs along frontages of, mid-block commercial projects, and then the old streets on the other portions of it. I don't think this has been thought through, and I do not believe that this is good public policy. We do not want to be the first one to instigate or start this as being vetted. We believe that it should be brought forward to the city council and a much bigger, broader discussion be made about the conditions of roads, the deterioration of roads, and maybe the update of the general plan and all the work that's being done is going to be the best place for that. But this project should not take the brunt of it. We did work with Kevin. We did say that the improvements that he's asking for were vetted, and we looked at them. They are acceptable. We don't agree with them, but they are acceptable. Just like it is, we did not agree with the undergrounding of the pipeline, but the staff wanted it, and we finally had to go with it. Otherwise, they were not going to move the project forward. It's the idea that the staff agrees to it or the applicant agrees to it. It's a tough way to put it. We were made to agree to it, and it is a condition of approval. we want to move forward with this project. It's been through a lot. And we ask that the yellow statements in the conditions be removed. You can leave the sections of the improvements in there that were identified by Kevin, and we can move forward, and public dedication of the basins, and we could move forward with this project. And we thank everybody very much for your time on this project.
Thank you, Lori. So if there are no other questions for the applicant from the commission, I'll go ahead. Are there any other questions for the applicant from the commission? Okay, so if there are none, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this item and bring it back to the commission for discussion, comments, or motions.
Is there,
I don't know if anybody's muted. So if there's, I'll make some comments. I was a little surprised at the initial roads, 11 IJK condition. You know, we talk a lot about affordability in the city, and to do have such a large item dropped on a project. I know it's a big project and it's probably a small percentage of it, but if this is going to go across the board on smaller projects, it's going to be a bigger percentage of that project. You know, again, we talk about affordability. This only makes things more expensive. I agree with the rest of the commissioners that this is probably something that needs to be talked about a lot more and probably at the next level. But I don't agree with those conditions. With respect to the basins, I do understand about the water boards and the potential for future requirements to the city for maintaining that basin. I know that there are some other basins in the city that have been taken care of by homeowners associations, but I think this one might be best if it was city owned. With respect to the railroad, again, it is a private entity, so and I did listen to Mr. Emoto regarding his comments, and I agree that it's probably not something that should be put on this project. With respect to the flood channel, this was brought up in the specific plan conditions, so I think it'd be okay to leave that one be. So that's kind of where I am on the project. Anyone else wishing to make a comment, a motion, or further discussion?
I would like to make a comment as to the railroad. I do agree that the offsite improvement is warranted and that it is something that should be shared by all parties. So I would agree that it is something that needs to be shared, and I don't know how or in what proportion they would make the share of that, but it is true that these projects affect the railroad because the railroad is everywhere, all over the city, and that is the way that we used to travel before, and so they are impacted by a lot of the projects that come. And I believe that I take their point in that they are affected negatively every time a project is, because they don't really gain anything from it. So I do agree with the applicant as well that this is something that should be shared. As to the flood control, I agree with the other commissioners, which is condition 29, condition 25 and 28. I also agree with the rest of the commissioners that it should be a publicly owned basin. And as to condition 11, the condition, Kevin has informed us that that the standards were improved and changed April of this year. The applicant submitted a date provided by Ms. Edie was 2016, and the map was July 1st, 2019. Based on those dates, I believe that they were not given notice when they submitted for the project. And yes, moving forward, that is the new standard, and that's what we should follow. I do believe, though, it is in the purview of the Public Works Director to make these changes as it is written in the code. However, as I stated, when they submitted their project, they didn't know that the code was going to change, and holding them to the standards would not be reasonable.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Anyone else wishing to make a comment? Commissioner Seifert?
Thank you, Chair. So I disagree with Commissioner Hernandez on the railroad. I'm looking at the letter here. The last time they did any work to that crossing was 1973. So if I owned a railroad and I needed and I had to maintain it, I would say that they've let that go on their own. And I think that at this time, I'd like to see them get it fixed up, and I'd like to see them do other maintenance. I'd like to see them make some more crossings in this town, and I'd like to see them work with us a little bit better than they have in the past. So I'm against having that condition as far as having any participation with the railroad on that crossing. I think they own it, and it's theirs. They haven't done the maintenance on it, and that's up to them. And as I stated before, that bridge was not something that could ever be attainable with the PG&E lines. Those high transmission lines and the bridge just weren't going to be compatible. The bridge really wasn't an option. So I don't agree with the railroad. The flood channel, it sounds like that's pretty much set in stone, that was part of the specific plan and in place when they started this project. The basin, I do believe it needs to be private, and I do believe that there are ways, very good ways, to take care of the costs. I understand that the city is afraid of Regional Water Quality Control Board, and they're rightfully so, everyone is. But I think that they're in a unique position to work with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I think they have the maintenance and the infrastructure in place to deal with the basin. And actually, if they do it on a tax base rather than the homeowners association, there won't be any loss of funds, and they will have the money, if not even a little profit, to work off of on this basin. I'd like to see that private. As far as the roads, I know that there's commissioners going both ways on the roads. To me, I think this is something, as Commissioner Hernandez pointed out, it wasn't pointed out to them when they started this project. The conditions have changed, the codes have changed during this time, and on this project, I wouldn't hold them to that new standard. And as far as I am very concerned after hearing Engineer McEwen's assessment of our streets, I've always thought that our streets were maintained very well as far as other cities. When we come in and we do our seal coats and our chip coats, I find that we have some very good streets, and I think we've had some very good maintenance on those streets. So I wasn't aware that there was this huge shortage and they felt that our streets were failing. If that is the case, I believe that rather than just change the code, we do need to go to city council. We do need to go citywide. We need to get an apparatus in effect so that we can do our maintenance, and that everyone in the city that is driving and working on and using these streets needs to be involved in that process. So I like the project, but that's kind of the way I'm seeing it moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Dickerson, please go ahead.
Commissioner Seifert, can I ask you a question about in relation to Commissioner Hernandez's point that you brought up about that they put their plans in, and so they didn't have notification of new things. When someone puts a project in and then they don't build it right away, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it gets built, but something changes in a worst case scenario, something like asbestos or something like that, where you have completely, you have to change and have new, elements that have been brought in for safety issues or whatever the reason is. Isn't it generally accepted though that the project, even if it was approved from the old standards, pretty much has to live up to the new standards? And I don't know what that is, so I'm asking.
I'm not an expert on it, Mr. Commissioner Dickerson, but it would seem common sense would say if I'm applying at this time and these are the conditions and these are the standards that you're going to hold me to, that yes, that's what I agreed to. That's what I'm going to move forward to. That's what I'm going to allocate money to. That's what I'm going to bid out and figure as my costs. So things do change, but on this particular project, I think that moving forward from this project, as Engineer McEwen has shown us, that if we have this big of an issue, then rather than holding this development and every other developer's feet to the fire to fix these streets, we need to come up with a regional fix, and it's not going to be done by this project, and by killing this project, it's not going to be done either. So if we impose these new conditions and they can't build the project, we still have the same street. We still have the same problem. We don't have the increase in the traffic, but we do lose quite a bit by not doing the improvement. So that would probably be better asked of Heather, and I see her smiling in the corner there.
Heather?
Assistant City Attorney Whittem.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. When you're in the application process and policies change, rules change, you're still going to be subject to them. You aren't locked in until you have a vesting map that's been approved or you have a project that's already underway. But while you're still in the application process, working with staff, if there's changes to standards, those would apply to you. That's the legal answer. That's different from your philosophical answer of, should it apply to them when they didn't really get wind of it potentially to your satisfaction. The other thing, though, that was said about, well, if we don't approve this, then the roads don't get improved anyways. That's true, but they also aren't further impacted by all the additional traffic trips that are going to be generated by this project.
And we don't get the traffic mitigation fees associated with this project either.
It's a weird thing. I'm not quite sure why it is that, it seems like each of these large developments always manages to, it manages to have an argument that flies in some way as to why they don't pay the fees. And a good example was the auto dealers. What was it, $2 million or something like that was waived. And, Mr. McEwen is telling us that, they're upside down by millions of dollars every year. So I'm not quite sure how that flew, but it did. So as far as the railroad is concerned, I agree with Commissioner Seifert on that. I don't think it should be shared. I think this is a maintenance that is on them and perhaps has been on them for a while. As far as the basin goes, I also agree with Commissioner Seifert on that. I think that should become a private entity as well. The specific plan locks us into the flood channels, so I think we're tied to that. And then the roads, and then we end up with the roads. And the applicant, through Mr. Moore, has said that they are willing to accept the definitions per their gray, per the gray versus the yellowed. And at least with the gray, they've got some idea of what the cost is going to be, and it should be able to pencil out at that point. I do believe that this is a much larger question that I hope at some point gets addressed by somebody, probably above our pay grade. But it gets dealt with as far as the roads go. But for now, and having to move forward with this project, I think probably going with Mr. Mora's altered gray text probably is the palatable medium, if not a happy one.
Commissioner Blanco, go ahead.
Just want to make sure I'm understanding a couple other commissioners, Commissioner Dickerson and Commissioner Seifert, in terms of the basin. I think both of you mentioned private ownership there, but I thought the prior arguments were public ownership. I just want to clarify those two
I meant the city owns the
comments.
basin. City owns the
Okay,
basin.
so public. Is that what you had intended, Mr. Dickerson, Commissioner Dickerson?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be
That's what I meant by
sure. Okay. And then I think what would be very helpful, at least for me, is to understand where the conditions stand currently, so that if we want to make a motion, we know what we're making a motion to. I think the discussion is good. I just don't understand exactly where things stand currently with the conditions. Is there a way we can get a summary or some direction from staff as to where we are right now currently? And then that way we can clearly make any motions, appropriately.
Real quick, before, I'm sorry, Dan, don't mean to cut you off. I did see Rec and Parks staff had either something to comment on with respect to the, I think the basin. Mr. Christian, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lopez. Commissioners, I just wanted to weigh in. One of the assumptions throughout the night has been the standard that most of these public basins that are maintained now are owned by the city. Public records actually shows that most of these basins are owned by private entities and that we are just doing the maintenance on them. So this hasn't been the city standard, but I understand that there's some new concerns related to the State Water Board that I'm not going to weigh in on, but I just wanted to mention most of the basins that are under my care are actually privately owned.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Okay, and then I believe Mr. Engineer McCune has a comment. Engineer McCune, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. So I think I have a question more for probably the city attorney's office. So what I think the Planning Commission is debating is a condition that would assign ownership to the city. And I'm not even sure if that's within the realm of the Planning Commission's authority. I don't know. That's the question I'm asking. Certainly from the Public Works point of view, my understanding is staff is opposed to this all the way up to the highest levels of the city. So I guess I'll stop there and see what the city attorney's office thinks.
Heather Whittam, Assistant City Attorney. I agree with you, and I have the same concern. I agree. I don't think the Planning Commission has the authority to agree to accept property, although we do accept dedications of other infrastructure. So maybe it would be the same way by which you would accept a dedication of a street or some other public infrastructure.
Right. But what if the city doesn't accept it? I guess that's the point, is that it's not that the Planning Commission accepts it. I think the city only has the city staff have the discretion to accept it. So I want to make sure the Planning Commission understands if they write a condition that the city staff opposes, I'm not sure that solves anything.
Yeah, no, I'm having the same concern. I don't think that the Planning Commission can commit the council to accept a dedication of a basin.
Right.
So would it be then that particular element? Would it be a suggestion that we make to the city council. Because, and then the next question I have is, Ms. McCune's kind of opened up a tad of a can of worms. So the question is, then the next question is, anytime the planning commission okays or votes for any type of property to be sent, to be given over to the city, right of ways, that sort of thing, does it go back to the city then? Individually, staff actually gets to line item and redline each individual thing, that it is not our authority to have done so, even though basically that's how the system is worked. And no, it's not working for this particular element for the city, but it seems to me that's how we've done it all the way along. And if we're going to be questioning that, that becomes very interesting, doesn't it?
I think that the clarification is that Planning Commission can put in a condition requiring a developer to offer something up for dedication to the city, but then whether the city accepts that dedication or not may or may not happen. But in this situation, I don't think the commission could mandate or require that the council accept this basin for dedication. You could require the applicant to offer it for dedication, but I don't think you could require the council to accept it.
So would that be true then of every time the city or the planning commission votes on shifting lands into the public sector from, from roadways, pathways, everything along that line? I mean, are what we've really been doing the whole time suggesting that they make the offer that can be turned down at any time, or are we making the decision that that's what's happening?
You're requiring, usually it's based on staff's recommendation, because Public Works and staff have looked and decided that certain roadways, that they want them dedicated to the city, or various utilities, they want them dedicated to the city. But then it's the city then that it has to accept those dedications. Maybe Mr. McCune can add more how that practically plays out at his end.
Well, then just going back in. So what you're saying, though, it sounds like Ms. Wyndham, is that we can only approve things that staff has already approved of. In which case, where's the authority, and what's the point of us sitting here for the last 400 hours on this damn measure? I mean, it seems to me that when we approve something, it's always been approved, even if it is not the direction staff had originally wanted. If we do things differently than staff wanted, nobody's ever questioned whether we've had the authority to move forward with that, or that we need to go back to staff and say, this is our suggestion, but if you don't like it, by all means, it doesn't count. I
think the distinction here is that in the end, you're would be recommending that the city acquire a piece of property, and that's different, I think, than what you're normally used to.
So what's going to be the direction then next time there is a right-of-way issue? And I mean, you see what I'm saying is, I mean, is it that we don't have the authority, that we only have the authority if staff gives us the authority? Or do we have the authority?
I think you have the authority to condition that a developer dedicate property, and then the city accepts it, but I don't think that they have to agree to accept an entire piece of property. I think it's different from a right-of-way or a utility easement, or those types of things.
If it is, I'd love to hear what the legal standing on that is. Yeah, I'd love to hear the legal opinion on that splits that hair, but okay. I'm done.
So then, yeah, this is a little perplexing. So we can always make the recommendation, but the next level, the next hearing which will be the city council, could ultimately go either with our recommendation or not, right? I mean, it's only a recommendation.
No, I believe this is not going to the city council unless it's appealed.
Don't trackbacks go to the city council?
This is a resolution.
This is a resolution for approval, but I believe that the final map does, and Mr. McCune can now elaborate on that process, but there is a process that occurs after planning commission to finalize the track map.
Mr. McCune, is that something you can shed some light on?
I think I'll defer to Mark. I just don't know the details. Mark, can you talk about what the next steps would be after the planning commission?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the municipal code, the subdivision ordinance. Following, let's see, final map processing. I don't want to get this wrong. I apologize.
I'll take your time, Engineer Mueller.
And just while we're waiting, just to speak to the Commissioner Dickerson's point about dedications. So generally, the city's in favor of dedications. So it probably is not an issue when they serve a public purpose and they can serve our mission. That's what we're interested in. In this case, these basins are being created to serve the development. The city is not staffed and budgeted to maintain them. And frankly, it's creating a burden on the city. And so I don't think it would be appropriate to oppose, I guess, to force the city into the position of taking on liability and assets without, for instance, input from this risk manager. And there's a bigger decision to be made than done at this level.
Couldn't that be said about any road, though? That by saying that a development needs to develop a new road, that we are encumbering the city with the maintenance of that road once built? I mean, isn't that the same argument? And that the benefit is that we get the road. In this case, the benefit is that we get the basin also that shifts water around and makes sure there isn't flooding and all that other nonsense.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Engineer Mueller.
I just wanted to comment on the tentative map versus final map question. Tentative maps are approved by Planning Commission. Final maps would go to City Council following tentative map approval. Apologize.
Thank you. Okay,
Heather Whittem again, but just to clarify, the final map comes way at a later date, and the final map just confirms that everything that was required of the tentative map was done. So it isn't like a new review process where things would get discussed.
But if it is a recommendation, don't they have that final say to a recommendation?
No,
this is Frank Albro, Senior Planner. And so yes, Mark is correct, and also Heather is also correct. The Planning Commission approves tentative maps. The only time, and this may be what the commission is thinking of at this point, if, for instance, lots are smaller than the standard, then that does need to then go to City Council with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. But if it's a map where all the development standards are followed, then the commission is the final determination on the tentative map. So the conditions that you adopt or approve tonight are going to be the conditions for this tentative map, unless appealed to the council.
Thank you, Frank. So essentially, we can move this forward with as it stands, and the applicant can appeal to the city council.
That's correct. Anyone can appeal to the City Council.
Thank you, Heather. So Commissioner Dickerson, I don't know if I don't know if you were looking at making a motion or not with respect to the, sorry, had the window open. With respect to the condition of the basin being public as opposed to private or private ownership, is that something that you might still consider?
So if a motion or a resolution was pushed forward and it included that the basin be taken over by the city to make it a public basin built by the developer and then taken over by the city, how would that work as that thing moves forward? I mean, at that point, does city staff try to appeal that? Or do they deny that? Or do they deny the whole thing? Or how is that going to function?
I suppose the city council could appeal the decision.
The city council would appeal the decision.
Could.
They wouldn't, yeah, I mean, they wouldn't just line it out?
No, I don't think we can just line out. Whatever your decision is tonight, that's the decision. And it will only be overturned if it's appealed. Or modified, I should say, if it's appealed.
Uh-huh. And then you said that the city council would have to do that. I'm not questioning their authority. I'm questioning who judges that appeal then. Because normally an appeal goes to city council. So how
Right, but there is a mechanism by which something from the planning commission, the city council can feel that it's of such importance that they want to hear it and they can have it brought before them.
All right. What if the other commissioners don't mind? What is your desire on the basin issue? I mean, I can make a motion, and I'm just kind of curious how the other city council members or the planning commission members feel about how the basin should be dealt with.
Personally, Commissioner Dickerson, I'd like to see the city maintain the basin and take the responsibility of it. I'm not sure about the land ownership, but if they have the responsibility, then we know it's going to be maintained. We know that we're not going to get in trouble with the water board because the city is going to make sure that everything is done correctly. If we leave it up to a homeowners association, we have no idea if that association is going to be in effect, if they're going to pay their dues, if they're going to go ahead and maintain that basin. We might be in worse trouble leaving that and then getting fined by Regional Water Quality Control Board. So that's the way I look at it.
Other commissioners?
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Commissioner Dickerson, I think that there was three people, including myself, or four, that were looking at the basin to be city maintained or city owned, public as opposed to private. So I don't know where Commissioner Hernandez is on that. I know that again, I'm looking at this as a recommendation, and then instead of maybe it being on the consent calendar at the city council, they can pull it. You know, I believe that the city engineer and the city attorney can obviously let the city council or city manager know that this is kind of what went on at the planning commission hearing, and if the city council would like to review that recommendation, they could always pull it instead of, like I said, instead of being consent calendar, they can pull it from the consent calendar and open it up.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I do want to make it clear, whatever your decision here is tonight, that is the final decision on this tentative map unless it's appealed to the city council. So it's not going to be coming before them, the tentative map. The final map comes later, and that's just to confirm that all the conditions of the map have been met. So that's a totally different process. I just don't want you to be misled. Whatever y'all decide here tonight, that's the decision unless it's appealed to the city council for the tentative map.
Ms. Whittam, is there, once again, splitting hairs and nuances, is there any difference to us recommending city ownership of it versus city maintenance of it? Or do
Those are two very different things. In fact, the city,
and do we have authority for one, but in your mind, but not authority for the other?
the city already, city staff is already agreeing that the city would do certain maintenance of the basin. It's the ownership that staff is recommending be held by the developer. But hearing this evolve, and I just haven't dealt with this before, planning staff, I believe, could have included a condition that said that the city would own and maintain the basin. And then it could have come to you that way, and that would not have gone before the city council. So I think you do have the authority to modify the condition as you want. And if the city council wants to rehear it, I do believe there is a process by way it can be appealed to get before them.
Thank you, Heather. Commissioner Blanco had his hand up. Commissioner Blanco?
I'm trying to remember what we had this discussion a little bit with the Northman project, and we didn't have this discussion. We had this issue, and I don't remember having this lengthy of a discussion. What was the result of that? That didn't seem to have any issues. I know there was ownership going back and forth in maintenance, but Dana or somebody in planning, can you refresh us on what direction that went? I thought that was in the end going to be publicly city maintained and also city owned. And I believe that doubled as kind of a pocket park too. And so maybe that was a little different, but in terms of ownership, I think it was publicly owned there as well.
Commissioner Blanco, that was before my time at the city, but my understanding is actually that particular basin is going to be privately owned. So Scott Christian with Rec and Parks is here, as well as Director McCune, who could comment on that, I think, but that was my understanding.
Thank you, Dana.
That's my understanding as well, that the Northman, that is a privately owned basin.
Okay.
And actually what Mr. Christensen was saying is, I think he looked into the basins, and he found, of the basins that he looked at, I think he found some 12 that were privately owned and 2 that were publicly owned. And I'm not sure what parameters he was looking at, or what geographic, what the parameters were of that. But there are lots of privately owned basins in the city, and there is a justification for it. It's very costly to take on those obligations, and these are times where the city has to be very careful with our budget, and the city can't, as we're seeing with the roads discussion, and the city can't just take on additional obligations as easily as maybe as it did in the past.
Thank you, Heather. Commissioner Dickerson, if you want to bring this home, we'll entertain a motion.
I think Commissioner Hernandez has been trying to jump in here.
No, I think that we're ready to make a motion. I think that we have consensus on the 4 items. And so if I can make a motion that condition, so I'd like to move that we approve this without condition 25, 28, 11, and that we keep condition 29, the specific plan. And the railroad was not a condition, so I'm not going to address that. So that would be my motion, that we approve this Gloucester Southeast Area 5B tentative track map at the northeast corner of Gloucester Road and Battles Road, TR 2019-003, without condition 11, 25, 28, and that we keep condition 29.
I'd like to interject.
We're both
interject as well. I'll pass it over to Dana. I think rather than just deleting conditions, there's modifications to conditions, because there's still large parts of, say, condition number 11 regarding roads that would still remain. The ones that were raised by Ms. Tamura were just specific portions, but I'll let Dana go through them.
So
Thank you.
if Dana wants to go through each of the gray areas in the letter.
Yes, thank you. So it looks like you've got 3 different conditions that we're looking at this evening and in modifying, and I know your motion includes deleting some of them. So condition 11, there are 3 letters under that condition, I, J, and K, and the applicant has provided a comment letter with some of their requested changes. And so I would just ask for some clarification on whether your motion includes the changes being requested in the letter, or if it's just deleting all 3 of those. I think we do need to keep some portions of those conditions in as they address other improvements to Stoll and Battles and Blosser that we would need included.
Well,
And then,
so to answer that, I just wanted to make sure I wanted to say that with the language included in the letter of Lori, it's just that if I sit here and I read all of it, it's going to be a really long motion. We can certainly do that. But I wanted to make sure that it's as presented by the applicant with the amendments, not delete the conditions.
okay, yeah, I think if your motion just says as proposed in, the letter dated December 16th, 2020, that would cover it for condition 11, I, J, and K. The other 2 conditions are 25 and 28, and those address the detention basin. Condition 25, there is one small typo I did notice on that so this condition says, as noted in condition of approval number 78, that should actually be 77. And it talks about the Rec and Parks Department maintaining the landscaping, storm runoff capacity for the basin on lot 12. And then it goes on to mention that the basin would be privately owned. So, and what responsibilities would be for the applicant. So I think what would be helpful on that condition is your motion, including whether it includes removing any language that addresses the basin being privately owned and instead mentions that the city would own it, or if you were looking at deleting the entire condition. I think it was not the entire condition, but I was just looking for some clarification on that. And so that's for condition 25, and it's the same for condition 28, because condition 28 references a privately owned and maintained basin on lot 12.
Well, I believe that condition 25 and 28, the consensus was that we wanted to be dedicated to the city. However, there was some discussion as to that was even in our authority to do. So I want to make sure that we're in compliance. And so I would just, my motion would be that we amend and include the proposal by the applicant for condition 25 and 28.
Okay, and in their letter, they are requesting
Lot 12 and the detention basin be dedicated to the city.
lot 12, lot 12 in the detention basin shall be dedicated to the city of Santa Maria, and the city will accept this basin upon completion of construction and inspected by the city Public Works Department. So that language would then replace the language in this condition that talks about lot 12 and the detention basin being privately owned, and then the other maintenance section.
That would be the motion. And then as to condition 29, we would, my motion is that we keep the condition as written by city staff.
Okay,
And that's by resolution, correct?
It is a resolution.
Yes.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, been seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we please have a roll call?
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, Chair. Can I get a clarification on condition 11? I just want to make sure that I understand that. As part of the motion, what is the recommendation on condition 11 again?
removing the items in yellow.
Okay.
Of the letter written by Ms. Lori Tamura on December 16, 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Hey.
Mr. McEwen wants to chime in.
Okay, yes, Mr. McCune, please.
I'm sorry to jump in. I just wanted to make, what I heard Ms. Edie say is the condition would include a requirement for the city to accept the dedication. That's the part of it I think that you probably can't do. I think you can offer dedication, but I don't think you can bind the city. That was the clarification I wanted.
Thank you. Thank you.
We should find out, won't it?
Looks like.
So then we're right in the middle of a motion. We're right about to vote. It's been moved by Commissioner Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. May we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Dickerson,
Aye.
Commissioner Blanco,
Aye.
I just had a, who am I missing?
Me,
Seifert?
I'm
Tim and
sorry,
Tom.
Commissioner Seifert,
aye.
Chair Lopez.
Aye. Motion carries. There was only one resolution. Is there another resolution on this?
Only saw one.
That's it.
Okay, got it. Thank you all. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Before we go on that break, I do have a conflict of interest on the next item. The property is located within a block of my office that's owned by my family, whose building's owned by my family. So I will recuse myself from the next item and turn it over to Vice Chair Blanco for.
Oh, that's so Weasley, Tom. Yeah, so do I. Me too.
So we'll take a 5-minute break and Vice Chair Blanco, could you take over after? I'll see you guys, I guess, next year.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Have a good evening. Will do.
Thank you.
All right. Back in 5, everybody.
All right.
Dan?
I had turned the sound off. I turned it back on.
There you go. You there, Tim?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay. I'm talking to Lori on the phone, talking to you.
Hi, yes. I paused the recording, so once we're ready to get started again, I'll restart the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, we are at 5 minutes and I believe it looks like everybody's back. So I would like to reconvene the meeting, 10:10. And so we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. And that's item number 2, the Vino Bello Apartments downtown permit at 120 West Chapel Street. May we please, actually, are there any ex parte communications of commissioners that they need to disclose? Okay, seeing or hearing none, let's please get a staff presentation, staff report.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission.
Okay, I gotta go.
This is Vino Bello Apartments. It's a downtown permit. The location 120 West Chapel Street. You can see the project site here. Excuse me one moment. Here is the project site. It is at the southeast corner of Lincoln and Chapel, just north of Main Street and just west of Broadway. It shares the same block as that major intersection. It's a 0.3 acre site, and it was the former location of a car wash, which has been demolished. The site is vacant and surrounded by other uses in the downtown ordinance bungalow district. The bungalow district is on both sides of Chapel, and it is adjacent to the Gateway District, which is along Main Street and along Broadway. So here you can see a picture of the site. This was taken a few months ago, but it generally looks the same. It's vacant. It's got a security fence around it. And you can see some of the buildings in the background. To the east is Chapel, or excuse me, Chapel development. And then further south, you see the auto deal, or excuse me, the auto tire store. And there's some adjacent buildings to the west. So here's some views of the surrounding. Here is Lincoln Street. This is to the west of the project site. Here's the northwest corner of Chapel and Lincoln. You have the north side of Chapel and Lincoln with Lincoln on the left here. So this is looking north across the street. And then here's looking further east of the project site. And you have some small retail buildings. One is currently occupied by a restaurant. This is the site plan for the project. So there's a number of things I'd like to discuss on the site plan. The project is asking for some amendments to the standards of the downtown specific plan, and specifically one modification that they're asking for is to reduce the setbacks along Lincoln and Chapel Street to go to the property line with the building. The setbacks are typically 15 feet on both sides of the property here, but to make accommodations for parking, they needed to modify the locations of the buildings and place them closer to the street. So they are asking for a reduction to go to 0, essentially, on the north and the west portions of the site. They meet the minimum setbacks for the interior side yard and the interior rear yard. And while I have this slide up, I do want to mention the parking. Now, this project was seen originally at the January 9th, 2020 downtown committee meeting. And at that meeting, it was received favorably. And the Planning Commission has also seen this at a recent study session held on December 3rd. One of the comments from the Planning Commission at that December 3rd meeting was regarding the parking on site. This development is requesting to rely on the on-street parking and adjacent public parking lots for providing the parking. The project is required to provide 24 spaces, and they are, as of the study session, they were providing 6 spaces. So they had 3, essentially what's going to be under a second level, and then 3 additional parking spaces along the alley. Since our study session, the applicant has worked on adjusting the parking, and they're able to get 1 additional space by removing a little bit of the landscaping. They're still in compliance with the minimum landscape requirements, but they were able to get 1 additional on-site parking space. So they would like the commission to consider that they were able to modify the plan and get 1 additional space. The commission also had suggested bicycle parking and so forth. And in a later slide, I will show you where the applicant has also been able to accommodate some bicycle parking. I do want to go back to a slide, and I don't know that, I'm certain the commission has not seen this iteration of the plan. This was the iteration of the plan provided to city staff with their initial application. As you can see, this on the north frontage adjacent to Chapel, they provided a 15-foot setback originally. However, they only had these 5 parking spaces adjacent to the alleyway. A lot of the space was used up by adding additional 10 feet simply to accommodate the maneuvering room that's required to have parking in this configuration. So it was per staff's recommendation and suggestion that they modified their parking facility to accommodate more on-site parking, and therefore resulted in moving the building closer to the setback. So where they started with 5, they now have 7 on-site parking spaces.
Third.
One thing that was mentioned at the study session as well was the parking facility. It's a public parking lot currently at the southeast corner of Chapel and Pine Street. That facility is going to go through a renovation and become more of a park space. And at one point in time, there was consideration that some of this park space could be essentially flexed as daytime parking. That is no longer the case. However, this redevelopment of the main parking lot there does provide 25 parking spaces. So 25 of the existing parking spaces will remain in slightly reconfigured fashion, but there will still be off-street public parking spaces available. And this parking lot is within 200 feet of the project site. Additionally, the Chapel Street frontage and Pine Street frontage will be restriped with additional parking. And so we'll also have 18 on-street parking spaces on Chapel and another 5 on-street parking spaces on Pine Street. So the nearby on-street parking and the availability of 25 spaces in this parking lot, and with the addition of an additional space on the site for 7 on-site parking, will be providing the parking for this project if approved by the commission. So moving on to the architecture. So the downtown specific plan has development standards and provides guidelines for architectures within the different districts of the downtown plan. And this project exemplifies some of those guidelines. This is clearly a Spanish mission style aesthetic here with this building. You can see the details of the wrought iron on the roof lines, some decorative vents. You have the Spanish tile roof, shutters, deep windows with heavy mullions and sills and awnings provided at the second and ground floor levels. And you can also see that some of the wrought iron decorative detailing on the balconies, as well on the ground floor patio areas, the light fixtures that follow the style, plus the colors accentuate the Spanish style. There's also some other features that are kind of hidden in the drawing here, some decorative arbors and some decorative awnings over certain portions of the building. So here you can see the north elevation and the west elevation. So these will be the elevations facing the side streets. Again, you can see the details, the arches, the various planes, faces of the building, stepping back and forward, some of the more the wood trellis awning features, and of course the wrought iron details here. The refuse enclosure is going to be adjacent to the alley, and you can see it at the lower right-hand picture there. So here's the south elevation, and you can see where some of the under building parking is available here. Here's the refuse enclosure. And then here's the east elevation. So these are photographs that are taken directly out of the downtown specific plan. And as you can see, many of these features have been mimicked with the proposed architecture. So staff is in support of the design of this building as conforming to the goals of the downtown plan and their architectural standards. Here are the bedrooms. There's going to be 32 units. Some of the bedrooms are 3 and 2 bedroom size, but most of the units, excuse me, are studios or 1 bedroom plans. One of the things that staff had spoken to the applicant about since the study session was laundry facilities. The prior plans had laundry facilities on just the ground level. The applicant has revised the plan to provide laundry and bicycle storage on each floor, as you can see here on the 3rd floor, here on the 2nd, and here on the 1st. I'm going to expand that a little bit to show a little bit more detail about what the typical would look like with washer and dryers combination, and then bike storage racks provided for the bicycle storage, which was something that was brought up by the commission at the study session. And here you see the landscape. They are providing the minimum required landscape for the downtown plan. That's provided in not only the spaces along the edges, but also within the patio area and the decorative paving. And the downtown plan also provides for allowing upper level decks, which you see here on the 2nd level, to be counted towards providing that open space. So they do meet their open space. And in addition to that open space, which they're meeting completely on the site, they're also re-landscaping the 2 frontages and providing additional street trees and parkway landscaping. So that concludes staff's presentation. We recommend that the Planning Commission by motion approve downtown permit ET 2020-0017 with the modifications to the site plan to add that 1 parking space and with the addition of laundry and bike parking facilities on each floor. And I know the applicant is in attendance through the Zoom meeting today, and they also have a presentation that they'd like to go over. But at this moment, if the commission has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Frank. Does anybody in the commission have questions of staff? Commissioner Seifert, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Blanco. So, Frank, I don't remember that setback being back. I thought so at the study session, the building wasn't up to the street on both sides?
No.
So that's a new elevation? The elevation you just went through is new also?
let me answer those questions. So this is the site plan that was proposed at the study session.
Okay,
Since the study session, they've added this one additional parking space on site for a
okay,
total of 7. Part of the conversation at the study session was an encouragement for the applicant to try and find more parking on the site. And so what I had done was go back to their original proposal when they originally submitted to the planning division for this project. This is the plan, excuse me, this is the plan that they had submitted.
okay,
Knowing that 5 spaces was very few, staff, city, myself, actually, encouraged the applicant to relook at the plan and consider ways to provide additional parking on the site. And so what you're seeing here is the very first submittal to the planning division. And part of our comments were, we'd like to see more parking on this site. That's why I felt it was important to show this, to show that the applicant has been working with the city and has modified their original proposal, which can be seen here, to provide this kind of parking configuration and enable them to get more parking on the site. However, providing this configuration and providing more parking necessitated them to move the buildings further north.
yeah, I don't have an issue with that, yeah.
That reduced the setback.
So on the washer dryer room, I mean, that's completely up to the owner as far as I'm concerned, but it's looked like 1 washer and dryer per floor.
I believe it's 2, a set of washer and dryer per floor.
Okay.
But I defer to the applicant for comments on that.
Well, it would just, no, I mean, it's his building and he's going to rent it out. It would seem like you would need a few more washer dryers. And I'm hoping that if we do see this through and we allow the parking the way it is that if he's taking up more of his property with rentable product, it would be nice if the rent was low enough, if the rent reflected that. And obviously I have no control over that, but we're looking at getting younger people with less money, and we're hoping no cars, because the parking, for 5 years, you've told me we don't allow off-street parking, and now we only have off-street parking. So I'm just saying, I understand where we're headed with it, but I just hope the rents obviously are adjusted accordingly for the lack of, I mean, he's got more building there than we would normally allow. Other than that, that's really all I just wanted to ask about those 2 items.
Thank you,
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert.
Bring up a good point that I'd like to reiterate. I made this point at the study session about parking. And yes, typically for most locations within the city, on-street parking is to be ignored, essentially. At least our code does not allow us to credit on-street parking towards a project such as this. However, this is within the downtown specific plan. And that downtown specific plan, one of the major tenets of that specific plan was to encourage development by providing very flexible development standards. And one of those development standards that is given quite a bit of flexibility is the parking. The downtown specific plan recognizes the public parking lots in the area and actually has different levels of concessions, essentially, for those public parking lots, so that projects within close proximity of the public parking lots, if this was a retail project, it would require no parking whatsoever.
Wow.
However, being residential, the downtown plan recognized that parking for a residence has more weight or value than parking for retail, where you might want to walk the block and shop. You want to be somewhat close to your residence. So there is a requirement for parking here. And like I mentioned, the applicant is asking for a reduction. But the downtown plan specifically does recognize the value and the contribution on-street parking plays, and then also the public parking lots play.
Thank you, Frank. I think Commissioner Dickerson, go ahead. You have a question?
Commissioner, you're muted.
Commissioner Dickerson, you might be muted.
Yeah. I wish, I'm sure my wife wishes she had one of those automatic buttons, she has to do it internally. No, Frank, the question I had was, I don't know if I missed a slide. Sorry if I was distracted for a moment. If you had the slide here or if I remember it from the study session, but do you have the slide that shows shows all of the public parking areas in and around this project?
I can pull that up from the past presentation. It'll take me just a moment.
And while you do that, do they sort of get credit for each of those, or is there a calculation involved that gets us to being able to have so little parking, or is it just kind of a general feel?
So let me switch my screen here if I'm able to do this. So is everybody seeing the slide? Great.
Yeah.
So here's the project site. You can see the yellow outline here. So this is the existing public parking lot. And like I mentioned, it is being converted mostly into a park space, but there will still be public parking. You have the town center west parking lots, and then you have, of course, town center east parking garage within 1,000 feet, and that's walking distance. So the downtown plan looks at different zones, and this area surrounding the town center east and town center west, going down to Boone Street to the south and up to Chapel Street to the north, is Zone A of the downtown specific plan. And that is per the parking incentive map. And so the parking incentive map generally looked at most of the sites within that Zone A are within 700,000 feet of a public parking lot. And therefore that public parking should be credited essentially towards the parking for the uses that go into this core of the downtown area. And so for commercial, assembly, any other use other than residential, it says that no parking is required. Just flat out, the downtown plan determines no parking is required within that Zone A. However, for residential, it does say that half a space is required for apartments less than 400 square feet. A quarter of a space is required for units 400 to 600 square feet in size, and then one space for units more than 600 square feet in size. Which does bring me to another point. I know in past commission meetings, there have been discussions on parking and particularly with multifamily projects. And many of those projects had multiple bedroom units and larger units. The units for this project, let me get to my notes here, range in size from 400, and I think the biggest is less than 1,000, or approximately 1,000 square feet. But those are only a couple of the units. There's only a couple that are more than a studio, which they're actually slightly under 400 square feet, the studios proposed for this project. So part of the concerns in past hearings has been expressed that, you have an apartment with 4 bedrooms you might get 4 adults living in one per bedroom, and then you're going to have at least 4 cars. For this project, because the units themselves are so small, that likelihood has also been reduced simply because of the size of the units. You're probably not going to have a number of adults living in a 400 square foot unit. So partly some of the concerns that might come up with other projects perhaps are alleviated with this one.
Frank, as you alluded to, there's that one parking area that's mostly going to be turned into a park with some parking, which I would assume really ideally is for the park itself. Can we go back to that?
Yes.
And then there were the 2 spaces in Town Center West, as well as the parking on Town Center East. I can't remember if it was Commissioner Seifert or who brought it up, but aren't some of those spaces, in essence, up for bid for turning them into something other than parking? I mean, they exist as parking at the moment, but it's a little disingenuous to say that they really should be credited for parking, given that, we're looking to sell them, right?
Well, the situation that this project finds itself in is that, I mean, they've been working with the city staff for more than a year now on developing this project and relying on what the downtown specific plan tells us we can do. And the downtown specific plan specifically identifies those parking facilities within the parking zone map as being available for the downtown uses. And yes, yeah, I agree that
it's a bit of kabuki theater, isn't it? Because I mean, for God's sakes, the applicant is one of the people bidding on one of the pieces of property that we're trying to sell them.
Sure. Well, the applicant is relying on the downtown planning. And those projects did come along after the initial submittals for this proposal. However, even without the Town Center West parking lots, you still are going to have the on-street parking. And the applicant has provided a graphic, which they'll be able to present, that depicts the number of on-street parking just within the 2-block area of this plan. So there's sufficient on-street parking immediately adjacent to this project. And there's the parking lot with the 25 spaces that will be converted, but still have those 25 parking spaces available.
And again, bottom line is that staff feels comfortable with the parking available, even if you were to take those lots out of the mix. Staff is comfortable with that it meets requirements for downtown.
Yes, it meets the intent of the downtown plan. The applicant has gone through, as you can see, iterations and has done their best to increase the number of parking spaces on the site. And there is available adjacent on-street parking and in this parking field, all of which leads to part of the recommendation of staff, which is the Planning Commission approved the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I think we're ready to hear from the applicant. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. If the applicant is ready, we're ready to listen to their presentation. I see raised hand, Ms. Rayner.
Thank you, Vice Chair Blanco. Can you also make sure that Scott Martin also has audio availabilities?
I think I do. Thank you.
Awesome.
Can hear you clearly, yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Frank, for the initial presentation, staff presentation. We'll try and keep it short and sweet. My name is Rachel Rayner. I'm the project planner from RRM Design Group. Along with me tonight is Scott Martin, project architect, both of us representing the applicant and the proposed project before you. Thank you for your review and consideration, Vice Chair and Commissioners, for being back here again reviewing the project so soon after the study session on December 3rd, as Frank mentioned. We appreciate your feedback that we received that afternoon, and as Frank has mentioned, we've incorporated it into tonight's presentation, which Scott and I will overview a little bit more. If you'd like to proceed to the next slide, thank you, Frank. You can land right here for a little bit. So just a little overview of some of the project goals and how the project is consistent with the downtown specific plan. As Frank mentioned, the bungalow district acts as a transition between downtown and the adjacent single family and lower density uses. Downtown acts as not only a place for working, but a place for living. And we think that this project will strive to meet a variety of needs and preferences. Not everyone wants or needs the American dream, the white picket fence, the postage stamp. People want to be close to services and amenities in downtown. We feel that this slightly higher density project is consistent with and supported by the downtown plan, as Frank mentioned. It's an overall improvement to the now vacant piece of property. You can proceed through the next two slides, Frank, since you kind of went through the location and setting. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, sorry. Thank you. You can land right here for a second. As Frank already mentioned, we're fairly consistent with the downtown specific plan standards. We're underneath the max height, and we meet the landscaping minimum percentage requirements. We do include 2 requests in tonight's request before you, included in that the setback reductions along Chapel and Lincoln. Next slide. And the parking space reduction, as we've already discussed here tonight. Just wanted to give you that brief overview. I'm going to turn it over to Scott Martin now to go in a little more detail about the architecture and the rest of the project details.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Commissioners, I'm really going to try to just highlight sort of how you've become a vested partner in this project. We really appreciate your feedback from last time. I think that's the purpose of the study sessions, and I think it's resulted in what we all feel is a better project. So similar site plan, I'll add to Frank's previous narrative. You know, we did have greater setbacks. I think this is actually a more urban, more downtown appropriate project, being closer to the back of sidewalk. It was also derived from your existing fire apparatus. I just wanted to point that out. There are some real challenges servicing a building above 3 stories, and you need to be within 15 feet. So because of that greater parkway and curb setback, it was also a fire directive that we moved that building closer. So we're asking for a variance, but it's something fire's also asking for, and I think the city planning staff encouraged as well. We did increase parking, and I know that sounds, yeah, we added 1 spot, but it made a big difference, we think. That the parking requirements in this area are already low. That 1 spot actually gets us closer and closer between what is on site and the adjacent diagonal parking on Lincoln and Chapel. We are almost fully parked in what you see right now. We're not quite there. We're still a couple spaces shy, and I'll show you a little bit of strategy. But I want to make sure that we're not expecting people to walk from the lots that the city is thinking about selling and from miles and miles away. We think this is a very walkable downtown. We think some people ideally won't have cars, and others will be able to find desired parking nearby. So next slide, please. The architecture, I think we touched upon at the study session. I appreciate your feedback. We didn't make major changes here. We are still moving ahead with what we think is a very appropriate architectural style. Next slide, please. This really highlights the bike storage and the laundry storage. You know, we've done a number of multifamily residential projects, and there's certain laundry ratios that we like to use for sizing of laundry. We're right there in the ratio. It's not oversized by any means. So I thought that was a really good catch. You guys are doing a fabulous job of dissecting these plans. We do have 2 washers and 2 dryers per floor. That's about 10 units per floor. So we're right in that sweet spot of maybe needing 1 more per floor. I think that's the thing we definitely take into consideration and look for as we move forward. But I do think it's a great improvement having that distributed by floor as opposed to the 3rd story unit coming down. So I also really do appreciate the bike storage and in general, think all of that makes for a better project. So here shows the ground floor and the additional parking space as we move through the slides. You can see that stacks. It's a similar location. So I really think getting some of that feedback from you last time just made this project better. Slight modifications with the new parking space and some site constraints as we change that on the landscape plan. Again, you can start to see the delineation, some of the parking around. Next slide, please. This is sort of the compact, secure, long-term bike storage. I think that's really important for those commuters. There's people in my office now who, gosh, I think their bike cost more than my first car did, you know? So some of these bikes are rather fancy. They are their primary mode of transportation in a multimodal society. And we want to make sure they're secure and safe. Next slide, please. This gets a little more into the on-street parking. You know, you raised the questions last time and we got a little excited, like, I don't know, how many spaces are there? And we didn't quite want to go to the public lots yet. This is purely what is striped on street. So there are 28 and 34. You can see the tallies of each sort of block there. Like I said, just outside of our side of the street on our block, we would need just a handful more spaces. So we know these are open spaces. None of them are dedicated to our project, but having, you know, in this general vicinity, 4 or 5 times what's required for the overall project, we feel very confident that that this will fit in and knit in well with the existing parking spaces around. However, we did look, if you look at the next slide, what you see in blue is what's called a pedestrian shed. It's a 5-minute walking circle from our site. Now, 5 minutes, I know, not all of us, but we all should, dang it, get out there and walk 5 minutes. That's really not so bad at all. First of all, there are 3 transit stops. That's the asterisks, the orange asterisk. So that's public transportation, bus routes that get you through other areas of town to the primary shopping corridors, to the primary job centers. There are also the multitude of public parking lots within there. I'm not going to say we're going to use any of those, but I think we all know that they may not all disappear tomorrow. That there will continue to be available parking. But we really look towards what we're calling the alternative modes of transportation. This is a pedestrian zone. You can walk to the mall, a 10-minute walk to get you to the Civic Center, to the library, to the other public functions as well. So we think we are knitting well into the existing downtown fabric. Next slide, please. The color and materials we talked about before, we appreciate sort of the dialogue about maybe a more modern architecture. We think we can do a clean version of a Spanish that will appeal to the masses, but still feel of place and contextual. So that's where we're heading. There's quality materials here, sustainable materials that are going to last and look great. Next slide, please. I think it's clear what we're asking of you tonight. Wow, I was blown away at your earlier dissertation. So I hope this is a little bit more clear. I think this is all within your purview, and we're trying to set the table as easy as possible for you here tonight. We are asking for a setback reduction. We are asking for a parking reduction, both of which have been vetted through your city staff, your engineering department, your fire department, and they all agree with it. So we hope this decision's a little bit easier on you, as you all deserve praise for your jobs, or not even your jobs, your side jobs. But that's what we're looking for tonight. Next slide. We appreciate the continued work. We think this is a project rooted in the downtown specific plan, conforming with staff's desires, conforming with the community's desires, influenced by your study session, and we appreciate, we're asking tonight that you approve this project and move us forward so we can help with the housing shortage that is plaguing not only this community, but our entire state. So that's all I have for tonight. We're here for questions. I know I didn't do the full thing, but I think because you got the study session recently, you get the gist of what the project is. We tried to address those specific concerns that were arised then. So thank you very much for your time. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin and Ms. Rayner. If there are any questions of the applicant from the commission? Sorry, I need to find my participant screen real quick. Looks like we do have a hand, and I don't, oh, Mr. Seifer, go ahead. Mr. Seifer.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So, yeah, Scott, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, it did follow the guidelines of what we asked for at the study session. And I know you are following the guidelines of the specific plan for the downtown and the bungalow section. So I'm the one that has the thing about the parking. I know whenever I used to go to lunch, it was at the North China, and there is never a parking spot on that street. I can tell you during lunchtime. That does right in front of your building, all the way up to the Broadway. Now going to the east, that's very possible that there is parking open up in that area. There's not a lot of businesses, not a lot of people using those. So the stuff out on the street in front of your project there, it's going to be iffy as far as parking. And the stuff on Pine, when you get past Family Services, there you're going to have some spots. But when you're in that corridor towards Main Street, it's going to be pretty congested during business hours. With we've got some tire shops and some other things over there. But I've been directed that the parking isn't an issue on this. I do appreciate the architecture. I like it. I think the addition of the washer dryers is huge. I know my daughter still comes to my house here and does her laundry, so it would be nice that is something that people moving out and first house, or maybe not even a first house, it's nice to be able to have a place to do your laundry. So I appreciated that. So overall, I think it's a value to our city, and it meets all the zoning and the requirements, and I think it's a pretty project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Any other questions? Any other commissioners have questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I do have a couple of questions. Mr. Martin, I did lose my internet connection at the point where you were looking at the bike racks. Are you able to, or maybe Frank could bring up that slide one more time and I could take a quick look at that?
Yeah, I think that has to be Frank. I don't see an option to share my screen, Frank.
Yes, I'm getting to it right now.
Frank can do it.
Okay. So are we looking at the vertical racks or the flat racks? Is there one specific?
It would be both, Commissioner. So what you see in the upper left, that's what we call short-term bike parking lot or bike parking. You'll see that all throughout town. There's a standard. Your bike sits on the ground, and you simply padlock or chain lock your bike That's open to the air. We have a spot near our courtyard where that could happen. That's mainly meant for your guests and for your short-term visitors. The other, what you see labeled as long-term parking, there's two different systems there. I prefer the one on the right. The one on the left works as well, but it's in a fixed position. The one on the right, you can slide up and down depending on the size of your bike and the type. You know, some people have these big, huge mountain bikes, and some are the little commuter bikes. And now we're seeing even electric bikes. That's becoming very popular as well. So oftentimes we'll put an outlet for charging options in here as well. As you saw, we're sort of sharing laundry facilities with these. So it is a public area to the people who live in the units. It's not open to the general public. So the short-term biking, which is on the ground, that's really what's considered for you as a guest or as a visitor to the project. But this long-term biking, it's secure, it's enclosed, it's inside the building, it's weather-proof. Your bike's not gonna be harmed by rain or people just walking by.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I do like that product too. That one in the lower right-hand corner. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
A couple of other questions. The egress and ingress to the property, is it just basically one point at the courtyard location, or what are the ingress and egress points?
Actually, so Frank, can you put up the first floor plan? This is so different than being there and I can just draw on a piece of paper. I gotta tell you, it's a little strange for everybody. So right there off the sidewalk, right there. Thank you, Frank. That is one ingress and egress point. You can go either upstairs to the second and third level, or you can walk by the stairs and access the units on the ground floor. You also could, for the studio and the one bedroom on the plan south, their front doors are on the back side of that. So yes, you'd walk through the courtyard into there, or you'd come from the parking area into those two front doors. Now, ideally, for me with a multifamily project, we like this sort of hierarchy of public to private. So we really like the option that you can come from the public right-of-way, the street, the sidewalk, go into the courtyard and have a semi-public place. It's a place where you might mingle with your neighbors, you might see each other, you might talk about your day, and then from there you can disperse either left to those two units or right behind the electrical room. That also gets you into your circulation, and you can go to whatever unit you want. Then you take the stairs to the upper floors and access that way. Does that answer? Those are all pedestrian. From a vehicular standpoint, it is only the alley that is ingress and egress.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Last question. Is there any? Are there any security features that will be implemented? I mean, is there gated in any way? Is there any key and lock to access certain areas? What are security? What kind of security measures have been implemented, or are there any really?
You know what? That's a changing dynamic, and from an ownership standpoint, we have not settled on that. There's such advances in technology. I don't know if you've been to a hotel lately. Most of us haven't. We're all trapped in our house. But so often now you open your doors with your phone. The security mechanism. Gosh, if any of us ever lose our phones, I think that's when we're really in trouble. But a lot of multifamily projects are moving a similar direction. This is downtown, so there's a balance. I think the best security in downtown is what we call eyes on the project, being able to have people active who can see the project. Most behavior is much better when you're not hidden and secluded. So having eyes on the streets is very important. We did set it up so if you needed to, you could put a gate at the primary entrances. Right now, we're not proposing that, a pedestrian gate. We felt it was more important to sort of engage that public walk Each front door, of course, to each unit locked and secure. But I think there's a potential perception issue if you start putting up too much gate.
Sure. But there is some flexibility built in such that if it needed to go, if you guys wanted or needed security, the owner, they could do that, it sounds like.
Absolutely. There are controlled points there. I think, just ensuring it's in keeping and style with the architecture would be important.
Great. Thank you very much. It looks like, Commissioner Dickerson, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something to Commissioner Blanco's question. I was looking at the plans and I was, it almost was what you were saying is, eyes on, the more eyes you have on an area, potentially there might be, Frank, can we go back to that other one we were just seeing? There might be less security issues. And I believe it's too far down the road to incorporate this in. Maybe it's something I should have brought up at study session, but I didn't think about it. But, I almost wonder if it would have been better to have flipped the entrances being on the street and the in essence, backyard, little courtyard areas being on the interior. I'm a little concerned that the entrances being so clustered in small alleys or back areas of these apartments might produce a security issue. So once again, it's not something I'm going to squawk about now, but it's certainly something you guys might want to, as you go down the road with this thing, give some consideration to whether or not, as Commissioner Blanco said, maybe put some gates here or there. Anyway, it's just something to keep an eye on as you have tenants that enter the units and you can make up your own mind as to the safety issues there. I also want to give you complete credit for the snarky comment you made about our agenda item 1. I want to appreciate it tremendously, but others might not. But there you go. I like it, so you get credit for that. Thank you.
I was not looking for credit, but I really do appreciate what I can't tell you.
Don't start lying to us now, Scott. Don't do that.
I can't imagine being in your position on a normal day and doing this from your house with kids doing stuff. You all deserve a big gold star in my book.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Seeing no others, any other discussion or does anybody want to entertain a motion? Commissioner Dickerson.
Chairman Blanco, I don't believe we've gone to the public, have we?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Commissioner Dickerson, let's still, do you have a question still or a comment?
No, I was going to make a motion, but we should hear from the public first.
Yeah, thank you very much. And anybody in the public wishes to make a comment, please raise your hand or dial *9 if you're on the phone. Okay, I am seeing none. Dana, do you have any others? Do you see any that I'm not seeing or?
No, I don't see any raised hands at all.
Okay, all right. We'll close.
But...
Okay, we'll close the public comment period, bring it back to the commission for any other discussion or motion. Commissioner Dickerson.
Sure. If I don't have any objections from anybody, people don't want to make additional comments. First of all, I like the plan. I like the modifications they made. So with that, I would like to go ahead and make a motion that the Planning Commission approve the downtown permit DD 2020-0017 with the additional on-site parking space, laundry, and bike storage on each floor.
I second that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Dickerson, seconded by Commissioner Hernandez. May we please get a roll call?
Commissioner Dickerson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert?
Aye.
And Chair Blanco?
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on through our agenda. Other business, oral reports from Planning Commission and staff. Let's start with staff. Dana, do we have any reports or updates?
Thank you. Yes, just a quick update. We do not have a study session tomorrow. That was canceled. So our next public hearing is going to be on January 6th. That'll be the first one of the new year. And then at this point, we also don't have any items scheduled yet for the study session on January 7th. So we most likely will be canceling that one as well. And that's all I have to update you on.
Any other oral reports or anything from the commission members?
I have a question for Dana. So is it January 19th that the new commissioners are sworn in, or we have 3 people that are up for grabs? How does that work, Dina?
Yes, so that is going to be happening, I believe, around the 19th. And so at a future meeting, probably early February, the first meeting in February, we'll have an item agendized to look at identifying a new chair and if there are any new commissioners.
And am I wrong in thinking that if Council Member Moats was he's gone now, and Commissioner Escobedo took his place, does that make me a lame duck?
I don't know, Heather, what do you think about that?
It's my belief, I haven't researched this, but it's my belief that each council person appoints a planning commissioner, and then I believe the council as a whole.
No, I mean, my question is, if the person that appointed me is no longer a council member, but I'm still a planning commissioner,
right?
Does that make me a lame duck?
Yes.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, and then that's pretty cool.
I mean, I think the new council member gets to appoint their own commissioner.
Correct, but for now,
chats with him,
but for now, I'm a lame duck, right?
It means you're free to say and do anything you want, Tim. You're dangerous.
It's probably the only time in my life. I just wanted to clarify that. The only item that I have is that I would like to bring up is that the U-Haul, they never painted their building. So we saw stone, we saw the elevations, we approved everything. It was a hugely controversial issue. And I'd just like to get an update as to when they're going to paint the facade and clean it up and get it done. They've done everything else they said they would do.
Yeah, so we did look into that recently, and in speaking with Mr. Martinez, they are going to be submitting fairly soon to do those exterior changes. They just haven't come in yet with the plan develop. Well, they already did the plan development first, so with the building permits to do those exterior improvements. The last I spoke to Mr. Martinez, though, those plans are in process and they're expecting to submit them soon. But I can keep your commission updated on that as to when they get submitted and to that process.
Well, it would be nice. I mean, it's a very good looking elevation, and it would be nice to have that done. So thank you. That's it from the lame duck.
Thank you, Commissioner Seifert. Any other comments or reports from any other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I do have something. Keeping with the discussion we had at the last study session, I think it was the last one where I think Commissioner Lopez, Chair Lopez, had suggested a meeting or a study session with Caltrans to take a look at this truck traffic situation and some of these routes. I'd like to make sure that we, keep momentum there, but I'd also like to double down and see if we couldn't make that a joint session with the council and really, double down on our commitment to looking at this. And so we might as well, get both bodies together and really have one discussion rather than break it up into two. So I just throw this out there, Dana, and see if that's something we could, keep on our radar, hopefully for early next year, and see if we can't make that a joint session with with the council. And I think that would be very productive.
Yes, that's definitely a priority for us. And our director, Mr. Ing, is working on that as well. And we are looking at trying to get a meeting together as you described. So that's definitely something that we're working on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Dana, just to add to that, if we could look back at our minutes, we did have a Caltrans employee at one of our meetings, and it was a gal, and she did say she was very willing to look at moving our traffic off of Main. Her name's got to come up somewhere. I don't have it in front of me. I didn't write it down.
Okay, I can look into that.
And I would even suggest that we be talking to somebody at the planning level at Caltrans, maybe at the director level, and why not even ask Tim Gubbins, the District 5 director, to come down and join us for this discussion. We might as well have a very high level discussion and get it all out there. So it's good.
Yeah.
We might as well have the decision makers and the people that can really, get some momentum going for the city with this issue.
And I had asked Chun, and I believe he brought in I don't know if it was David or who he brought in, but to get a time study done so we can start getting an idea of if we divert the traffic going from the west side to 101 in the various areas, what are we looking at as far as actual timestamps and delays and whatnot. So hopefully they're moving forward with that, and we can have that for this meeting as well. We can have some real information.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The more information we can have, I think the better. And I think even Commissioner Hernandez mentioned some good information at our last session as far as she believed that there was some information already out there that indicated that there were routes that were actually shorter. And so having that information and ready to present, I think would be great. So I think that would be wonderful. Anyhow, not to hold things up any longer. We've been here for a long time. It's been a long evening, and appreciate everybody's hard work. If there is nothing else, and I don't think there is, then I will adjourn the meeting. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a half-hour dissertation I would like to read from.
I'm having a problem with my internet right now, Robert. I don't know what the problem is.
I don't see dissertations on the agenda. Sorry.
I'll table it then. I'll table it.
All right. Well, everybody, have a good evening, and we'll adjourn the meeting at 10:13. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.